The 17th regular meeting of the Medford City Council will come to order. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Council Camuso. Present. Council Caviello. Present. Council Knight. Present. Vice President Long Kern. Council Marks. Present. Council Penta. President Del Russo.
Present. 6 present, 1 absent. Please rise to salute the flag. I salute to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Motions, orders, and resolutions. 15-448, offered by Councilor Knight. We're going to wait on that because his father's absent. We want his father to come in. Offered by Councilor Knight, be it resolved that the MBTA, in follow-up to Council Paper 14-083, conduct a spring cleanup and beautification initiative at the West Medford Commuter Rail Station. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Council Paper 14-083 was filed some months ago by Councilor Caviello, and Councilor Caviello was working very hard with the MBTA to get some beautification initiatives completed down at the West Medford Commuter Rail Station, Mr. President. However, the winter came and the winter left, and here we are with the same exact West Medford Commuter Rail Station that we had beforehand. So I filed this resolution to start the conversation up again, to prompt the MBTA to come down there and do a spring cleanup. I'd also like to amend the resolution, Mr. President, because upon filing the resolution, I did get a couple of phone calls from area residents and business owners who have a concern about the, for lack of a better term, porta potty that is up against the fence behind the seafood depot, or the depot station now, I guess it would be called. And I'd like to see if maybe we can get that encapsulated or encased. It's my understanding after discussions with Karen Rose that the governmental entity is exempt from the local Board of Health's oversight. So hopefully this council will support my resolution and we can reach out to the MBTA and ask them to do a little bit of spring cleaning down there, Mr. President, and also do a beautification initiative to take care of that porta potty.
Very good. So on
according to Karen Rose, there was an Attorney General's opinion that was issued some years ago that would exempt the state from local Board of Health oversight on their property. And that was based on a conversation I had with her today. And that's what she told me, you know, and that came right out of the horse's mouth. Sure.
So we're going to amend that also to ask for a copy of the ruling that makes the MBTA a sui juris entity.
Yeah, it's the Attorney General's opinion some time ago.
Within the world order. So on that motion, amended by Councilor Knight, Councilor Caraviello.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, you know, I thank Councilor Knight for bringing this back up again. I worked diligently with, you know, Senator Jadden's office and some people from the T, and part of the thing was, you know, we did have some, we did get some cleanups and painting and stuff done, but I think part of the problem was the T has got a problem with how much money they can spend there. Like I said, you're only allowed to spend so much of what the property is valued at, and anything over that now means going into another level, because obviously the station is not handicap accessible. But last time we tried to get some smaller projects done, and you know, some of the people weren't happy with some of the small projects. But again, I would urge when we meet again, you know, let's take what we can get from the T and the small, let's see, no matter how small it is, and then we can go back again and ask. But to try to get it done in the big package, because they say it takes them over their thresholds for the value of the property, and it now turns into a $14–15 million project.
Very good. So on the motion of Councilor Knight as amended, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes. 15-449, offered by Councilor Knight. Be it resolved that the Board of Health, in follow-up to paper 14-708, propose a draft ordinance to regulate the sale and use of electronic cigarettes in the city of Medford. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much. In recent discussions with the Board of Health, I have learned that they have filed some regulations that have strengthened the controls surrounding electronic cigarettes. However, they're not necessarily where they need to be. So I'm filing this resolution, and I'm asking that the Board of Health take a look at the current ordinance and the current regulations that are in place and do their best to strengthen them. In our packets this evening, Mr. President, we have a correspondence from the Coalition for Responsible Retailing, and the Coalition for Responsible Retailing does come out with a certain number of recommendations relative to the retailing of electronic cigarettes and tobacco products, Mr. President. I'd ask that this document be included as part of the research when the Board of Health does sit down to take a look at this.
So, on the motion of approval by Councilor Penter, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. 15-450, offered by Councilor Knight. Be it resolved.
Mr. President, I'll withdraw the resolution at this time.
On the motion to withdraw by Councilor Knight. 15-451, offered by Councilor Marks. Be it resolved that the Eversource electrical project, which extends 3.2 miles underground through Medford, be discussed. And Councilor Marks, just before you begin your presentation on this matter, I was contacted by the lead figure or representative for Eversource on this project, and he's asked to be present at next week's council meeting to present to the council and to ask any questions. So I don't know if that will influence your desire to speak on this matter tonight to any extent, and perhaps will allow them to petition us through the clerk to address the council and to have the opportunity to address all the questions that we have with themselves here. Councilor Marks.
Thank you, Mr. President, and part of my resolution tonight was to request that Eversource appear before the council, so that's good news. There was an open house last night at the high school regarding this particular project, and I guess residents who had concerns or questions could have attended the meeting last night, although it wasn't well publicized in my opinion. But if I could, Mr. President, because this is a project that many people are not aware of in the community, and it's going to have a devastating impact on the roadway throughout much of our area, and expected to last upwards of 8 to 10 months of construction. So I think it's important that at least it be brought up tonight, and the council can ask questions regarding this next week when they present to us formally. But if I could, Mr. President, Eversource, formerly NSTAR, is proposing to install a new 115 kilovolt underground electricity transmission line in an 8-mile route connecting the Woburn substation to the Mystic substation in Everett. The Medford portion of the proposed route is about 3.2 miles long and extends north to south from the Winchester line on Winthrop Street to the Somerville line on Mystic Ave. Starting at the Winchester line, the proposed route follows Winthrop Street south through the Rotary at High Street and then under Mystic Valley Parkway. It then turns east to follow South Street to Main Street / Mystic Ave. Then we'll continue down Mystic Ave into Somerville and then to Boston. We'll again cross the Mystic River to finally reach the Mystic substation in Everett. In most places, the plan is to bury a line 8 inches in a trench about 2 feet wide, parallel to the existing electrical lines under the streets. The proposed project is constructed to begin sometime in 2017 and 2018. I had also general project information, and I wanted to just personally thank Mr. Kraus for providing this. But it goes on to say that the 8-inch steel pipe is going to be buried under our street, which will also be accompanied by a 2-inch diameter polyvinyl chloride, which is PVC conduits, for relay and communication cables. And they will be installed in a normal 24-inch wide by 60 inches deep. So it's going to be 2 feet wide, 5 feet deep. Also, Mr. President, which I found quite interesting, is they're going to have to also, they're also going to have to put roughly 17 manholes, create 17 new manholes throughout this particular stretch of the cable. And the manholes will be used to splicing cables, line testing, and maintenance. And they're going to be put approximately every 2,000 to 2,400 linear feet. So I'm not sure what 3.2 miles is in the city of Medford, but out of these 17 manholes, they're going to start from Woburn to all the way to Charlestown, which I think this is going to end up roughly. I'd be concerned about, and if we can make this part of the report, how many manholes will have to be done in the city of Medford for this 3.2 miles. Also, Mr. President, Eversource will be doing roughly in Winchester 2.3 miles from what I heard, not compared to our 3.2 miles. So our project is about a third larger than the Winchester project, and they're scheduled to last roughly 6 months. So when I said 8 to 10 months, that's just a ballpark I'm coming up with based on how long it's going to take Winchester for a smaller magnitude. As part of this particular program, from what I've been told from representatives of Eversource, the City of Medford has not asked for any type of mitigation. And I think that's important that we as a council initiate this next week, and I would also offer that, Mr. Clerk, as an amendment to this paper. So my first amendment is how many manhole covers will exist. My second amendment is what mitigation will be available for this community. And a third issue that I wanted to bring up is what is the length that this project will take? Will there be, the fourth one, will there be public meetings in the community to discuss this project? Even though it's a few years out, this project is going to encompass a lot of our roads, digging up a lot of our streets, and as we witnessed in the past, our streets never go back to the condition they were originally in when work like this takes place. So I want to make sure that we are protected as residents. Another issue is the hours of operation that work will take place on these particular lines. And that the Eversource, as well as the City of Medford, appoint a 24-hour hotline and also a clerk of the works to protect the interest of the residents and our city streets. And I'm happy to hear that, because I was going to propose that they appear before us at an upcoming meeting. I'm happy to hear that the council president was contacted by Eversource regarding this project, and that the council be furnished with any documentation that was presented at the open house last night, because I have not received any paperwork other than the paperwork that I looked up and also the paperwork I received from Mr. Kraus. And I know there were alternative routes that were discussed, and one that I posed that was asked last night was why couldn't we go along I-93, where I-93 goes through Woburn, it goes through Winchester, it goes through Medford, up to where you'd want to connect into Everett. To me, would make sense, less disruption for the residents of our community. And I was told that the Woburn substation is on the west side of the fells, and they cannot access the wiring from that side of the fells. So that's why they couldn't use an alternative route. And they did mention another route that talked about going through the heart of the Lawrence of States and going, I believe, down Governor's Ave, and the route was actually much longer than the existing route, which didn't make much sense. You know, I was looking for a route outside of our city and a smaller route, so that didn't make much sense. But I look forward to the questioning next week, and also the notification. I would ask, Mr. President, and maybe through your leadership as the president, this is an extremely important issue, even though it's 2 years out, that a reverse 911 call go out to residents that will give them ample opportunity to appear if they can, or watch if they'd like the council meeting next Tuesday to get information on this. And I would ask that we put out a reverse 911 call.
Reverse 911, Mr. Clerk. Requested of the Chief of Police and Captain Eric. Thank you, Councilor Marks. Councilor Camuso.
Thank you, and I want to commend Councilor Marks for bringing this up this evening. This is certainly going to have a major impact on our community, as is the Craddock Bridge, which will be going on roughly around the same time, I assume. But that project is so convoluted as far as timelines and timeframes, I'm just assuming at this point. With that being said, I like Councilor Marks, all his recommendations. Unfortunately, according to the councilor, there's no mitigation. In the past, Algonquin Gas paid mitigation, but I'm not sure the specifics of that project. But if that's something we can look into, but I want to thank the councilor for bringing it up. On a side note, if the councilor doesn't mind, or I can make it a separate paper, can we ask for the MBTA to come in at this point with another idea / proposal for moving the bus stop across from Medford Auto School down here in Medford Square? We need to get that done prior to the construction commencing. It's not going to be...
Point of clarification, Councilor Penta.
Pursuant to what Councilor Camuso, I had called him up and asked him about that resolution. I believe you brought it up maybe almost 2 months ago.
Yeah.
They said they never got it. They never got the resolution.
Did
So I think we need to ask again.
Did you send that out?
No, I believe the resolution was to have it be sent to the MBTA, to their Director of Public Relations, for the purposes of can the bus stop be moved. Pardon me?
It got referred to committee itself. So now you have to call a committee meeting to bring them.
All right. What's it?
You referred that to committee.
What's it at? Transportation Committee?
I can't remember.
I think it's Committee of the Whole for the Craddock Bridge.
Right.
Or Committee of the Whole for the Craddock Bridge? Okay. Either way, it's not going to be fair to the consumers and the people that utilize public transportation to find out 2 days before a shovel's in the ground that now they have to go to place X or Y or Z to catch transportation to get to work. So if we could call that Committee of the Whole in a fairly reasonable time. Last but not least, if we could also send to the Committee of the Whole, we got a paper this evening, and if we want to bring this up at a different agenda item, I will put something on, but if the councilor sees it as fit to just refer the paper from Cassandra Koudalidis, telling us that roughly $4 million to resurface and to mill and pave Boston Ave, Forest Street, High Street, Main Street, Mystic Ave, that the city owns, as well as Riverside Avenue, Salem Street, and Winthrop Street. I, as one member of this council, we have a lot of money in reserves right now. We also have a great bond rating due to the good fiscal management that's been going on here. I think these roads need to be resurfaced once and for all, and I think that's a project. I know as one member of the council, I would support a bond initiative or using some of the reserves for the $4 million to do a complete infrastructure improvement on these streets, and these are main thoroughfares, and it actually equates to, what did she say, as far as mileage, 58,000 linear feet. So it's 265,000 square feet of paving and milling that would take place, and it's something that I think we need to do. Now, the good question would be to ask the engineer, is this something that we should wait to do until after the project that Councilor Marks is referring to, 2 years down the road, or is it, because I'm not an engineer, I don't know, they talked about 5 feet underground and stuff, but is it 5 feet, I don't know, so would it make sense to do a major initiative like this after this project, or wait until?
Why don't we talk to the city engineer and
Yeah.
then call the appropriate meeting? So we have
Do you
those
mind if that's a
amendments.
B paper, Councilor, or do you want me to put it on? So,
It's all part of the main paper.
and thank you again to Councilor Marks for bringing this important item up.
Thank you very much to the both of you. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much, and thank you, Councilor Marks. I, too, would like to add a couple of recommendations, and I will be short. The first recommendation, Mr. President, that I think is important would be that Eversource provide access to a website for the goings-on of the construction here in Medford, so that a resident can go right on their computer and type up what's going on and be updated real-time, whether it's a Twitter feed or a daily update, something like that, to allow residents the prompt and quick sharing of information. The other item, Mr. President, that I'd like to see happen and that I'd like to recommend would be when, in fact, the road is closed up, that the repairs are done curb to curb, Mr. President, which would lead me into Councilor Camuso's amendment. And the resolution that he refers to in the paper in response that we got back, that Councilor Camuso refers to, was a request that I made to determine what the cost would be to resurface all our emergency arteries here in the city. And in looking at this Eversource project, I don't think that it's going to go across every single major artery in our city. So with that being said, I don't see any reason why we would need to wait to begin repairing our infrastructure and resurfacing our roadways here in the city of Medford. I think right now, with all the things that are going on in the city, the number one most important priority in the city should be repairing our roadways. It's really a quality of life issue. It's a safety issue, Mr. President, and quite frankly, it's very difficult for people to be happy with the services that are being provided when they come over from Malden on a clean street and a smooth street, and they don't even have to see the sign that says "Welcome to Medford." They hit the road and they know. So with that being said, Mr. President, right now I think the number one priority in this city should be taking a look at resurfacing the roadways, because it's causing inordinate damage to people's cars. It's making traversing the roadways a public safety issue, Mr. President. So thank you, Councilor Marks. Thank you, Councilor Camuso, for bringing these issues forward. I support this measure in 110%, Mr. President. I move for approval.
So on the motion of, on Councilor Marks' motion as amended, Councilor Caviello?
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with Councilor Camuso, and I think maybe we should wait for the engineer to see which streets are going to be affected, and I'd hate to see them dug up twice, because usually when they dig them up and put them back, they don't do a good job. Also, on the letter here, I could have recalled that Representative Donato received funding for Riverside Avenue through the Transportation Bond Bill that was filed last year.
Didn't go through.
I'm sorry, Mr.
It didn't go through.
It didn't go through?
The bond bill didn't go through.
Well, according to the representative, the money is sitting at the State House waiting for us to go and get it as part of the garage package.
No, garage didn't go through either.
That's not what the representative says, but, Mr. President, if you could check if that funding ever went through through the bond bill.
We'll check on that for you,
Thank
Councilor. Thank you. So on the motion for approval by Councilor Knight, all those in favor? Mr. President. Councilor Marks.
Just regarding the underground electricity proposal, I think we have to be mindful, and I know Councilor Knight has brought this up on several occasions, that Winthrop Circle has already been disrupted for many, many months regarding the drainage and gas projects that have been going on and still going on right in that particular area. And coupled with this potential project that's going to run right through that area again, you know, I think it's important we as a community, and I'm not sure what we can do to stand up and say, you know what, enough's enough with this particular digging and so forth. I also found, you know, when I looked at the general project information, I'm not opposed to, because it says the project's purpose is to improve reliability of electricity transmission within the greater Boston area, and to address thermal overloads within the existing electric transmission line. In combination with other planned greater Boston area transmission upgrades, the project provides a system with substantial flexibility to accommodate load growth. So I'm not opposed to expanding the electricity and the ability to gain electricity north of Boston, but I'm not sure why it has to be done on the backs of every resident in this community, and the inconvenience of digging our roads and digging trenches constantly in our community, and in my opinion, to get very little, if anything, in return, is troublesome to me. And I would hope that whatever the decision is, that we play a vital role at the table in deciding what the impact is going to be in this community and how much we think we can take as a community on the vitality and also the integrity of our neighborhoods. And that should be the utmost importance of all of us. So I just wanted to make that point that the residents on Winthrop and High Street and that whole general area have been going through all this construction, and to say in another 2 years you're going to be facing something similar is a problem, Mr. President. And hopefully we'll get more answers next Tuesday.
We all look forward to that. So on the motion for approval, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. 15-453, offered by Council Penta. Be it resolved that the ongoing school sex survey be questioned as it is being challenged by mass resistance. Councilor Penta.
Mr. President, before I speak, we have in attendance this evening the president of the state organization from Mass Resistance, Mr. Brian Kamenker, and I'd like to have him come forward and give his reasoning first before I make my comments.
Sir, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. And are you an official of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts?
No, I'm not.
It's part of a state organization.
My name is Brian Kamenker. I live at 84 Stanford Street in Newton. Our organization, Mass Resistance, is a pro-family group in Massachusetts, and we've been active for over 20 years. We advocate for parental rights in the public schools. I'm considered an expert myself in parental notification. I wrote the parental notification law in Massachusetts, Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 32A, which I have here, which deals with parental notification in the public schools. This past week, I testified before in the State House for a bill that we have, H-283, regarding surveys that are being given across the state. These are youth risk behavior surveys and other surveys which are created by the state of Massachusetts, and they're given by the various cities and towns throughout Massachusetts in middle schools and high schools. These surveys have very graphic, sexual, and other kinds of disturbing questions. That, in fact, the testimony that I and several other parents gave was so disturbing that it was covered by the local Fox News, WRKO Radio, and WGBH. The questions on these surveys given statewide in middle school and high school have to do with suicide, whether you've contemplated suicide, how many times you've had sexual intercourse, for instance, how many times in the past 3 months. In the past 3 months, how many people have you had sexual intercourse with? And the answers go from 0 to 6 or more. How old were you when you first had sexual intercourse? 11 to 17. When you have sexual intercourse, do you drink alcohol? Many of these questions have to do with drugs, have to do with family life, have to do with illegal activities such as do you carry a gun, and they're very, very disturbing. The problem with these questions is, and I had to deal with them when my own kids were in school, is that parents are very, almost never notified about this, and it's very difficult for them to see the test beforehand. There are also local tests. I have a survey here that was given here in Medford, which I received from a parent here in Medford. This was given in 2013 at grades 6 through 12. Some of the questions on this Medford test, and I'll leave all these tests for you, have to do with how many times have you used cocaine in the past 30 days, and the answer goes from 0 to 40 or more times. Marijuana, heroin, LSD, ecstasy, things like that. Some of the other questions have to do with depression. Sometimes I think life is not worth it, yes or no. At times I think I'm no good at all. Questions about your family life. Here's some questions. Do you feel close to your mother? Do you share your thoughts and feelings with your mother? Do you enjoy spending time with your mother? Do you enjoy spending time with your father? Things like that. These questions are very intrusive, and how it affects a child, especially some of these younger children, is very disturbing to parents and others. And since parents, the parent in this case only found out about this test because she made an effort to get it. Otherwise, she wouldn't have known. So what we are hoping here is that various city councils, such as yourselves, will send a message to the state legislature and saying that, you know, we want this bill passed. Your passing this resolution, a city council rather than a school committee will lend great credibility to this. So I want to thank you for giving me permission to speak, and I could certainly take any questions that you have.
Mr. President, I want to thank the President for being here. I think the intent of the bill needs to be said. It's to protect school children from obscene, sexually graphic, psychologically intrusive surveys conducted by the public schools without parental knowledge. These surveys also ask youth to reveal their criminal activity, personal family matters, and other intimate issues. That's the legislation that House Bill number 382 describes itself to. I have no problem as a city councilor, and hopefully the council, my council colleagues would be supportive of this. And I think it's fair to say there was an equal representation from both Democrats and Republicans on Beacon Hill who have signed on to support this bill. The piece of legislation that you're talking about, dating back to, was it 1975, 1978 that you wrote it?
The legislation, the current law, was passed in 1996 and signed by Bill Weld.
1996. And that piece of legislation is very explicit as it relates to surveys being disseminated by the public schools, for which parental notification needs to be given before the child either takes the survey or has the opt-out provision that they could take the survey.
Right. The current law, unfortunately, does not include surveys, which is why we have this new bill before the State House. And the new bill would require parental opt-in, that is, written permission for these kinds of surveys.
You know, it's disturbing, and not to be repetitive, but when they ask questions, how old were you when you first had sex, anal, oral, vagina for the first time, and then it says, you know, in the past 3 months, how many people have you had sex with? And it goes on to talk about whether you've taken cocaine, heroin, and it also talks about your parents text while they drive, and there's a whole host of issues. And I believe, if I understand it correctly in reading the bill and speaking to folks up in the State House on the Legislative Committee, their concern is when a child goes to school, it's got to be more than making the child be physically safe. The child now has to be psychologically, emotionally not disturbed because of going to school and taking these type of surveys. And so to do that, they feel that this type of legislation would, you know, at least put the parent on an equal playing field. At least they would be advised of it. Now, here in the city of Medford, I know you said, I think the survey was given in 2013, and, you know, some parents, again, once they find out after the fact, it's too late after the fact. I think another problem with these surveys, and some of these kids who are much younger, when they go to answer it, they may not know how to answer it, and they may just be writing all kinds of numbers that, you know, can escalate, 1, 5, 4, without really knowing. Maybe they don't even understand what the questions mean. And, you know, how do you get somebody in the 4th, 5th, and the 6th grade, you know, to understand all of this? You know, yes, today they may be more advanced because of what's on television and what's in the movies and stuff like that, but some of this stuff is really personal. And it's something that is a parental responsibility. It's their responsibility to make sure that their child understands what's on here if they are going to take it. So with that being said, it's not appropriate for the schools. I don't think it's appropriate for any school, public, private, or whatever, to make any decision on behalf of something that a parent has a responsibility and should have control over. A kid should not have to go to school, have that survey, and have the teacher say, we have to take the survey, and the parents have absolutely no idea on that particular day that that survey was given. And I think that's wrong, and I applaud you, and I applaud your organization and your efforts, and you know, there's a state rep up from Lowell. His name is Randy Mom, and I believe he's a foreigner who immigrated here to this country, and unfortunate enough. And he said this type of a survey is almost communistic because he comes from a country, I believe it was Cambodia, and these are the type of questions that they would have to deal with. And
Right, yeah, you're referring to the state rep from Lowell recently.
Right.
Yeah, he was a committee member, and he heard the testimony, and that was his reaction.
Right. And with that being said, Mr. President, I believe both chairpersons from the House and Senate are not only in favor of it, but that they appreciate the testimony that was given because it's being talked about, and maybe this can be sent back to the State Department of Education that you cannot. I mean, if you want to have these type of surveys to go out, communities and parents need to be informed ahead of time. The parent needs to see the survey, not be informed. They need to see the survey. Do you want your child to take this survey? And either they opt out or they opt in, one way or the other. But for what purpose it serves, I don't know, other than the fact that you're going to have some of these results turn around. And if I understand it correctly, in some cities and towns, these surveys were supposed to be anonymous, if I understood it correctly, but some people were identified by a number.
Right. I was told that in Medford, this was what I was told by this mother who gave me this survey, was that the surveys had the student number on it, and they were passed out that way.
And that doesn't speak well for a school system that allows that. So with that being said, Mr. President, I would move, and again, I would hope that the City Council would support House Bill 382. I'll read it again. It's to protect school children from obscene, sexually graphic, psychologically intrusive surveys conducted by the public schools without parental knowledge. These surveys also seek to ask youth to reveal their criminal activity, personal family matters, and other intimate issues. And it's House Bill 382. That's the bill. It's up in, there was heard on, I believe, on May 6th. Right. It was a full house. You had mothers there, you had single parents there, over and beyond mass resistance, and you had legislators who spoke quite frankly in favor of this because, you know, this is something that just needs to be stopped before it gets out of hand. So that's the motion.
That's the motion. On the motion, Councilor Carviallo.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I thank Councilor Penta for bringing this up because some years ago, I had a daughter that was involved. It wasn't a written survey. It was an individual survey where they personally asked questions. They asked questions that were totally inappropriate for a third grader, and they were asking personal questions about their home life, their parents, and again, I would hope this stops. You know, especially with the younger kids who don't really know the difference of the questions they're answering. So again, I applaud your efforts.
Do we have a text before us, Mr. Council Penta?
Well, this is what the bill is in essence. It's right there. I mean, I just read it to you what the gut of the bill is.
On the motion, Councilor Penta. All those in favor? Councilor Camuso.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick question. Now, are you a volunteer at Mass Resistance, or are you a paid consultant or an employee?
I'm a paid employee. I'm the president.
I'm sorry?
I'm the president. I'm a paid employee.
Okay. And Mass Resistance, I've known about it a little bit. Exactly what type of things do you guys lobby behind? And it's mostly family issues, is that correct?
Right, yeah. School. Our original name was Parents' Rights Coalition, and Mass Resistance is sort of a catchy name. We changed that maybe, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. But our actual legal name is Parents' Rights Coalition. So that's the official name.
Now, the Parents' Rights Coalition, was it under them, I think it was under that name, that you were strong opposition to the same-sex marriage and put up on Beacon Hill, and it was brought forward. Is that correct? Was that organization or the new one?
Yeah, we were also involved with that also. Yes, we were opposed to same-sex marriage.
It's not the same organization, Paul.
No, Mass Resistance is very much behind in opposition to same-sex marriage. I believe as recent as within the last few weeks with the court case up in Washington, D.C. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so all right. I just wanted to get a better understanding on what we're what we're looking at supporting this evening, Mr. President. And quite honestly, I don't know much about the bill. And as Councilor Knight alluded to a few weeks ago, the democratic process, as you know, it can be a bill that's submitted one way, and by the end, by the time it hits the governor's desk, it's totally different. And that's the democratic and legislative process. So at this point, I will not be supporting this evening.
Just as a point of...
And thank you very much for...
This bill, as he said, does have equal Democratic and Republican support.
I understand that, but I also am very cognizant of the fact that the legislative process, you can start out with the text and the verbiage of one bill being A, B, C, D, and then by the end of it, it's totally extrapolated, things added, things taken out, and I understand, and I have my own personal feelings about the surveys in the public schools, but certainly not going to take a vote based upon my own personal feelings, number one, and number two, I don't know where it's going. I would feel better seeing how it comes out of committee, if it comes out of committee, and then saying whether we support it or not. I know in the past, some of the initiatives that Mass Resistance has been adamantly against, the same-sex marriage, I'm on the other side of the issue on that particular matter. And at this point, I just don't have enough information to be quite frank with you, so I don't feel comfortable supporting something early on as this in the legislative process, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Camuso.
Just as a point of clarification to Councilor Camuso's comments,
Point of clarification.
we have filed bills here from the city of Medford that have made radical changes by the time, you know, it came out. All I'm talking about is the intent of what the bill wants to do. If the bill has to be amended, so be it. It may not even come out of committee, but it looks like it will come out of committee. The intent of this is to protect school children, but the law is very specific as it's written right now that parents, when surveys such as this are going to be disseminated, the parents need to be told ahead of time. Schools cannot just go out there and do it. And that's what the intent of this bill is. So all I'm asking you for is to support the intent of it. Then they can add it up and add it down after that. It's letting people know that, you know, if you want your child protected from this type of pornography in plain English, you know, now's the time to speak up.
Councilor Camuso.
And I appreciate the councilor's opinions, but as I stated, just in our own home rule petitions, by the time things get to the governor's desk, it's changed tremendously. We've dealt with that, as Councilor Penta said, right here, with stuff that was initiated in this building, and it was a lot of changes by the time it left the city clerk's office with the mayor and the council signatures on it, all the way to the time it got back to Governor Deval Patrick's desk. And for that reason, I'm not supporting this evening.
Thank you, Councilor Camuso. On the motion approved by Councilor Penta, all those in favor? Councilor Knight wishes to be recorded in opposition.
Reflect that Mass Resistance has been designated as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center in March of 2008, Mr. President. It's formerly the Article 8 Alliance, which led the charge on Beacon Hill to oppose same-sex marriage here in Massachusetts. Those are politics that I can't agree with, Mr. President. So for that reason and that reason only, I'll be asking to be recorded in opposition.
Thank you, Councilor Knight. Councilor Marks?
I'd like to answer that.
Point of clarification, Councilor Penta.
Councilor Knight just made a remark that it's a hate organization. If it was such a hate organization, they wouldn't even be entertaining this on Beacon Hill, and they wouldn't be getting the support from both sides of the aisle. But to say that they're a hate organization, I don't see anything in front of me that says they're a hate. That's your opinion, for what you maybe read someplace.
Point of information, Councilor Knight.
I believe the Southern Poverty Law Center in March of 2008, which I did state, made this designation, Mr. President. I'm not here to debate the merits of the resolution. That's why I'm not voting for it. That's why I recused myself when the debate was going on. I'm in opposition to the bill. And
I'd like to address that.
Sir, you'll be recognized at the appropriate time.
Mr. President, I think that the debate has ceased at this point in time. We're taking a vote on the matter. What are we talking about?
We can talk about it, Adam. Just let
what are we
people
talking
talk.
about? And that's why I left. I didn't want to interrupt the debate. I wanted to give you guys an opportunity to go through the reasons why you think this is good legislation. I just want the record to reflect why I'm in opposition. That's all.
There are Catholic organizations. There are all kinds of Tea Party organizations that have that same designation.
Sir, you'll be recognized when it's time for you to speak. Councilor Marks.
I was just wondering maybe if I can ask the gentleman, is this a bill that was introduced this year only, or has this been before the state legislature in previous years?
It was before the state legislature last session. We didn't really have a chance to push it last session hard. This session, we had more information, we had more parents who were very upset, so it really got its legs this session. It also got many more signers on this session of both parties once they saw what happened.
Are you aware of any other states that have similar state laws?
No, I haven't really looked into that. It seems to me that there is a federal law similar, but it doesn't, it's not as, you know, we're looking into that too. Whether there's a federal law that, you know, may or may not cover certain school programs. But, you know, we haven't looked into other states on this, no. All we can say is that there's a tremendous amount of emotion on parents when they see this.
Sir.
Just, President, also, has there been any discussion with the teachers' associations or administrative associations throughout the Commonwealth?
I've only spoken with teachers and administrators informally. Many of them are uncomfortable about this. I've spoken with 2 or 3 teachers who really don't like having to do this, but feel almost forced to. But I haven't had formal discussions with teachers' organizations. It'd be interesting to do. It's a good idea.
Mr. President, just if I could, you know, I think at the very least, and I think my council colleagues looking for at least an intent vote tonight, but I would feel more comfortable. I'll be quite frank, I didn't read the piece of legislation, although my council colleague just referred to. I would like to see this maybe come before a subcommittee so we can have some dialogue and discussion. This is an important issue, and I'm not prepared tonight to take any type of vote on whether it's intent or whether it's the actual language here tonight.
There's a motion for approval on the floor.
I would ask that it be sent to a subcommittee, Mr. President, for discussion.
Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, we also run into the situation right now where we have a elected body, the Medford School Committee, that sets school policy. And I wonder if this very issue of being able to opt in and opt out of a survey could be handled by way of policy at the local level as opposed to state legislation and the state legislature taking action. I think if in fact our elected school committee feels as though there's a need to stop this, our elected school committee would implement a policy thereof.
Point of information, Councilor Penta.
The gentleman at the podium, you indicated, sir, that the city of Medford in 2013 gave up that survey, correct?
It gave a similar survey, which I read from,
Okay, and
which I have here. And I
in that survey that was given out, parents weren't advised ahead of time.
The parent that I spoke to said that they were advised in a very general way, but not specifically that these kinds of questions would be asked.
And they didn't see that survey before the child took it?
No. This parent was able to do it through extraordinary means, I was told.
Thank you, Councilor Penta. You've made your point. Councilor Knight, thank you. Ma'am, you wish to address us? Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Jean Martin, 10 Cumming Street, and I just want to say that the schools don't want to do this. This is not something, this is thrown upon them because kids are behaving in these ways. So what I want to say is it's up to the parents to get more proactive, and this gentleman, this is reactive. The schools react when the kids are behaving in certain ways. And we know it goes on in buses, it goes on in parks, it goes on, you know, whether it's drug activity, whether it's sexual activity, whatever it might be. So the thing is, the onus is on the parents, and I would like the gentleman there to get all parents. He might be a good parent, but there's a, you know, there's a lot of parents out there that aren't talking to their kids about these topics, and when the parents don't do their job, what happens is it ends up being thrown on the school system. And it's a burden on the school system, and it shouldn't be on the school system to raise the kids with these kind of issues, and I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. There's a motion for approval on the floor. The chair is in doubt. On the motion, Councilor Penta.
The lady that just spoke, I wholeheartedly disagree with her, because number one, to say that the responsibility is on the parent. The responsibility can not be on the parent if the parent doesn't know what's going on. The responsibility is within the public school system. If that's where these surveys are being disseminated through by the State Department of Education, and they disseminate it to a public school, and then that has to go down to the student, the parents should be informed ahead of time that this type of a survey, and they should be able to read it ahead of time. So that way their decision is informed. You can't take a 4th, a 5th, or a 6th grader and have them sign a survey or take a survey without a parent knowing it. That's wrong. That's the whole intent behind this piece of legislation, to inform the parent ahead of time. And that's what the law is, Chapter 71, Section 32A. That's what it says. And unfortunately, cities and towns are not following the rules as they should.
There's a motion before us. Point of information, Councilor Camuso.
Just for the gentleman, I believe, I don't know if it was you or one of my council colleagues said that Medford did notify the parents, but it was vague.
That's what I was told by the parent, that it was very vague.
So Medford is following the law, if that's the case. We don't know. You're getting told secondhand, I'm getting told third hand, but...
Well, I think the problem is that the law is vague. The law just says you have to notify in some way, and so these parents are told, well, it's a health survey. They're not told about these questions. And that's what really infuriates them, is because once they find out, they're very, very upset. So that's the problem, unfortunately.
Thank you, Councilor Camuso. Thank you, sir. Councilor Caviello.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, while I am opposed to the survey, I'd like to see if Councilor Pender wouldn't mind changing this to just removing the mass resistance group here, because I'm not familiar with the group either. Though I say I am in opposition to the sex survey, but I say I'm not familiar with this group, and and I don't want to give a voice of support to a group I'm not familiar with.
So, Councilor,
but I am
so
I am
Councilor
in favor of not doing the survey.
Councilor Penta is going to remove what word from your motion?
I can revert the word Messer and the city of Medford and support the intent of House Bill 382, which is to protect children from obscene, sexually graphic, and psychologically intrusive surveys. I have it here for you, Eddie.
On that motion, the chair is in doubt. This is...
Just wanted to respond. I'm not for the survey. I think it's inappropriate and over the top. But the reason why these surveys come about is because the schools know what's going on more times than some of the parents and they need to be more involved with their kids. Because kids talk to other kids, and then word gets around in the school systems of who's doing what. That's what I wanted to say. So I think that a lot of those questions are over the top. I agree with you there. And it shouldn't be in the schools. But the reason why it ends up in the schools is because parents aren't following up and talking to their kids about these inappropriate topics. Thank you.
Very good. We now, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll on the motion by Councilor Penta.
Mr. Clerk, could you reread that motion again?
No, I can't.
You can't?
No, because Council Penta has the paper, the dialogue.
Oh, I'll read it.
Oh, sorry.
Let me see. The Medford City Council go on record to support House Bill 382, which is to protect school children from obscene, sexually graphic, it's 283. Is it? House Bill 283 to protect school children from obscene, sexually graphic, psychologically intrusive surveys conducted by the public schools without parental knowledge.
On that motion, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
To support the intent, not to support the bill.
Mr. President, it's House Bill 283?
Yes.
Who was it filed by, and was it filed by request?
It was filed by Representative Colleen Gary. I believe she's from Drake, Democrat, not by request.
Not by request, you said?
No, not by request.
Mr. President, I would just respectfully ask my colleague to send this to a subcommittee. I'd like to personally have some dialogue and discussion with members of the school committee, the administration, to see what their thoughts are behind this. I could see the face value on it, but I'm not quite sure I'm prepared tonight to vote on this, because once we take a stance on the intent, Mr. President, as Councilor Camuso mentioned, this legislation could go in a number of different directions, and I don't know if, as a body, I want to be on record depending on how this legislation comes out and how it may be, revised.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much. I think that we have recently voted to meet with the Medford School Committee to discuss a couple of topics.
They refused.
And maybe this is a topic that we can put on that agenda.
Thank you. Councilor Penta, there have been several requests of you to withdraw the motion.
No.
Councilor Penta's motion stands. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll. Councilor Camuso.
Just one more question.
Intent.
Just one more question for the gentleman. I believe, was this the same group that I believe you were successful in the early 2000s blocking Governor Cellucci's ambassadorship?
His ambassadorship wasn't blocked.
Well, no, but was until he agreed to no longer do anything that would protect the rights of homosexual activity in the Commonwealth. I remember a landmark, something to do with that. It was the Human Foreign Relations Subcommittee at the time, and I believe it was the group, might be the national group.
I don't recall.
Senator Jesse Helms at the time, that's who it was.
Yeah. I'd like to address this issue of the Southern Poverty Law Center. That group has been debunked on all sides of the political spectrum because of their activities of designating anybody on the conservative side on certain issues as a hate group. I mean, Catholic groups, Tea Parties, immigration groups, people like Glenn Beck, Michelle Bachmann, members of Congress. Over 1,000 groups and hundreds of people have been designated by this ridiculous organization. So it's very insulting to use that as anything that makes, with any credibility.
This is it. We're going to be taking our vote now, sir. Thank you.
If I may. The reasoning behind the Southern Poverty Law Center's designation of mass resistance as a hate group is because of the position they took. And I believe it would say that suicide prevention programs aimed at gay youth were put together by homosexual activists to normalize homosexuality. That's the quote from the website, Mr. President. Again, I know that there's a roll call vote. I'm going to be voting in opposition to this resolution, and I'd ask that the clerk record me for the reasons stated previously.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilor Camuso. No. Councilor Caviola.
Councilor Caviello.
Yes. Councilor Knight. No. Vice President Kern. Councilor Marks. Councilor Penta. Yes. President Del Russo.
No, with 3 in the negative, 2 in...
2 in the negative, 2 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative, 1 absent.
1 absent. The motion fails. Motion for suspension of the rules. All those in favor? All those opposed? Suspension of the rules for the citizen to address the community on the library. Please state your name and address for the record, ma'am. Welcome.
My name is Tamara Siegel. I live at 155 Forest Street here in Medford. And if I could just talk for 1 minute about the line item, the library line item in the budget. I understand the budget is on the agenda. Is my understanding that in order for libraries to be accredited by their governing board, they need to get a specific percentage of the city budget allotted to them. Medford is not getting that kind of money to be accredited. They have the opportunity to get a waiver, and there are other cities that do that. There was some years ago when there were budget cuts across the board. Many cities in the area in the Minuteman system went under budget. They got this waiver, and they were accredited for a certain period of time. Most of those cities and towns are now back up to full funding. Medford is not one of them. Medford is still well below the, I tried to do the math, I don't know the exact number, but well below the percentage to get their accreditation. The percentage that is missing of money is for staffing. The library is understaffed. I believe they're missing at least 2 staffing positions that used to be there. So as a library person, I love the library. I use it a great deal. My kids use it. If the Medford Library is not accredited, what that does for them, my understanding, is they lose their connection to the Minuteman system. They lose their all their online resources, the referencing that you can do online. They lose the ability to do interlibrary loan. It basically makes the library sort of an island with no connection to any other libraries in the area. And I think that would be a shame. And so I wanted to just make sure it was brought to your attention that that's an issue as you discuss numbers for the budget, and just hope that that would be something that you all could take into account. I think the library is something that's incredibly important in Medford. You know, my 5th grader reminded me today that even in the public schools, they log into the Medford Public Library from school and use the resources there. So I think that if we lost that, it would be a real shame for the city of Medford. So that's, I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming down tonight, ma'am.
President, if I could, just briefly.
Councilor Marks, does your button not work?
Thank you, Mr. President. Tamara brings up some very interesting points. We all received an email with a letter that was written to the mayor dated January 20, 2015. And I think your concerns about our library falling through the cracks and not being part of the Minuteman network because we are not meeting the required funding levels are valid concerns. And I would ask that we take a vote here tonight, Mr. President. Over the next several weeks, we're going to have pre-budget hearings with all the different department heads, and Brian Boudelier, who is the department head for the library, will be meeting with shortly. And I think it's only appropriate that we ask him the question whether or not Medford is in risk of losing its certification with the Mass Board of Library Commissioners. And if so, what amount is needed for appropriation to make sure that we provide the same funds that is needed to keep us within the Minuteman network, and allowing Medford cardholders. This is something that you mentioned. If you're a Medford cardholder now, you can go anywhere in the Minuteman network to that library and pull out a book or pull out a video and utilize the library. Without this particular certification, Medford residents can no longer have that access. And to me, that's a very important issue that needs to be addressed. So if we could put that in the form of a resolution asking the director, Mr. Boudelier, if we are in jeopardy, what the dollar amount would need to be to bring us up to the levels that the city needs to be at to be part of the network for Minutemen. And also if we can approach the issue of the lack of, as which was mentioned, personnel in the library, one the children's position and the other one the reference librarian, which we're down right now at the library. It was mentioned the other night that potential use of the public library, not just at its capacity, its current capacity, but also potentially building a 2nd floor in the library to have community gathering space, to have an art area. It could be used for a host of issues. So I see a rosy vision in the future for our library, and we have to maintain the funding and make sure that it doesn't get to a point where people no longer want to go to the library because of the periodics and the equipment is outdated. And we may be getting close to that, Mr. President. So I would ask that that be put in the form of a motion and voted tonight, that the director present that information when we meet with them in pre-budget meetings. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor Marks. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, can't say much more than that. Took the words right out of my mouth, so I rest.
Thank you, Councilor Knight. Councilor Penta.
If I understand this correctly, in speaking with Mr. Boudelier, we're short about $70,000. I think that's the dollar amount we need to get to. So if that's the case, and you know we have library reimbursements, and also at the same time, if with the argument that has been saying about refurbishing and put.
Point of information,
Just
Councilor
if I could, according to the research you did in your letter here, it says that it's about $270,000 below the appropriation requirement for certification. Now that's just based on what you provided.
That's not a hard number. I did a little research. That was me digging around online. I don't know the exact number, but there is a percentage of the city budget that is what's supposed to be appropriated for the library.
And that's what we're going to take a vote on tonight. So I just wanted to
Well,
ask.
the inclusion of the 70, or whatever the dollar amount might be. Well, there's nothing to be voted upon tonight. We don't have a number to be taken, so we're going to get a report. We're going to ask the director. But if I remember correctly, I think it's the city's portion of it. And if in fact any major development does take place to put that second floor on, as Council Marks has alluded to, the $70,000 would be more than enough to be included, or whatever the dollar amount might be, because the purpose of using it for the city and the city's usefulness will far exceed,
Absolutely.
you know, the dollar amount. The dollar amount will be included because that's the work that will have to be done. So I support it, but I just see that's the unfortunate part. Whatever the number might be, you need to have the exact number. And that just goes to show you, once again, this city council we've asked each and every year that when a budget is presented to us, we get the information ahead of time, or we sit down with department heads and ask them for what their wish list is as to why. And then the other day, most recently, the mayor's publicist, who works up at the high school as a teacher, sends out a press release that said the City Council and School Committee have been hearing from department heads over the past several weeks in a series of pre-budget meetings. The entire budget will be before the council. We've never met with the school committee. We haven't even met with a department head. And this is what you get when you have an administration that is so out of control, has his own personal publicist, who's a teacher up at the high school, with her own private newspaper, writing stuff like that. And when people read that, that's what's wrong. This is wrong information. We haven't met with anybody. We haven't even met amongst ourselves. We just got the numbers tonight. So how can you put in a newspaper article that we've been meeting for weeks with the school committee and with department heads? I wish that were the case, but it's not. And that's why this city gets itself in trouble. A huge lack of communication and miscommunication. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Caraviello.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could amend Council Marks' paper to ask the question to librarian Brian Boulay, which I've asked him the last two budgets. I'd like to see his 5-year plan for the library. Again, I want to know where the library's going. We're not going, we're just standing still. Where is his plan to show us where the library's going, or where his vision of where the library is going? And I say, I asked that last year, and I say, I'd like to make it part of Council Marks' paper if he doesn't mind.
Very
President?
Good. Councilor Camuso.
It may be appropriate, it may not be appropriate to bring it up at this point, but we received the budget this evening with a $5 million increase. $5 million increase from the previous year's budget. Obviously, Tamara's here that the additional money needed for the accreditation is not included in that line item. But more importantly, this city council has been asking for months now for the transfers of all the transfers of municipal funds in and to and from accounts, and we have not received that yet. How do we look at the budget realistically if we don't know how much money was transferred to and from line items that they're being presented to us in the next month and a half? It doesn't make sense. And then at the end of the year, we're going to get another slew of transfers to balance this year's budget.
Exactly. I'm surprised we haven't had them already.
We got a paper tonight from Ann Baker answering us the projected revenues, and that was the B paper to my original transfer paper request. So they answered the B paper because they wanted to, but the transfer paper, that was the original paper that was brought up, that amendment was put on. We have a beautiful report tonight on the amendment. But the amendment doesn't tell us a picture on how much money is being transferred to and from accounts. This is simple. For the regular person viewing at home, if you have a checking account, a savings account, and another checking account, and you transfer the money in between accounts by doing online banking, unless you actually look where the money came from, where it's going, and for what intent it's spent for, you're not going to know the actual balances. And it's the budget we got tonight without the transfers. Take the fiscal year budget we're in and throw it out the window. Throw it out the window. We know what's been encumbered, what's projected to be spent, but other than that, and we know there are accounts that are in the arrears right now. I don't know exactly which ones, but I'm assuming it's overtime accounts. I'm assuming it's other accounts out there. And unless we have a full accounting of all the transfers, it's unrealistic budget. And as I talked about a few weeks ago, we have $6 million, $6 million plus in certified free cash. It's certified because we didn't expend that money that was raised in previous fiscal years. And the DOR certified us to go ahead and put it in certified free cash.
Exactly.
So that's $6 million that was appropriated on the backs of the taxpayers for several years to get a savings, to put the city in a financially good spot for debt consolidation and other wonderful things that have happened over the past few years. But the transfer paper is very, very important piece of my moving forward in either supporting or not supporting a budget. You know, and this budget's going to be very, very interesting in particular too, because with the new administration, we don't know. This is where we can craft where we think the city should be going. OCD, I think, should be boosted up. We have to give the new administration the tools to do their vision. They may say that certain officers don't need X amount of people and other areas need it. We don't know. We don't know who's going to be in that corner office. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. President, I think we need to have those transfers. I think the transfers tell us exactly how much money of, and I want to say this the correct way, how much money that was put aside for a specific purpose at the end of June last year was actually spent on that specific purpose.
Very good.
And just for the viewing public too, the city council has to make transfers, and according to Massachusetts finance law, the only time the city council has to make the transfers if it's from one account that's totally different from another account. If it's from the police to the fire, or from information technology to the city clerk, or interdepartmental transfers. We don't have any control or any say, and nor does the administration need any vote regarding transfers internally. So they could put money in an account that's called water cooler for $5,000, say, and they can take that out and use it for something else without the city council needing to approve it. So hopefully that gives a good picture to people out there on how the budget actually works, where the certified free cash that we all talk about comes from, and more importantly, the budget that we pass, if it indeed is being spent in the areas where we put our stamp of approval on by a majority vote of the duly elected members of the Medford City Council year after year after year. So I would say, Mr. President, that I think you have to send the message to the city administration that without that paper, don't even bother showing up to a budget hearing, honestly, because we've been asking for it, and to get the B paper answered and not the original paper, it's kind of humorous.
It's insulting.
And insulting. You said it, not me.
Councilor, on the motion of Councilor Marks for approval, all those in favor?
Will we just make sure we know what we're voting on? I wanted to put that, and I think Councilor Caviello wanted to put his in the form of a motion for a 5-year plan.
He did.
Yes, I wanted to be.
A 5-year plan, and also that the Director, Brian Boudelier, report back to the council what additional appropriation is needed in the FY16 budget to make sure we meet certification for matching funds and that we don't lose our standing with the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, and also that we don't lose our standing, Mr. President, in the Minuteman Network. Those are three big issues I would ask that Brian report when he reports to us, Mr. President.
The clerk has that. On that motion, all those in favor?
One last question. I know it comes up during budget hearing, but Ms. Siegel this evening as well referenced it. If we also could see where the status is, if any, of the waiver going forward as well, because
The waiver.
we don't know. I know in the past years we've went after the waiver, but is that the intention this year to go after the waiver again? But I think that's part of the question that should be answered.
As amended. All those in favor? All those opposed? Following suspension. Commendations. 15-431. Richard Cormier. Recipient of the Stars of Life Award. Council Penta, if you would come up for any of the presentation. Mr. Cormier, who is joined by his lovely family.
Where is he?
He's hiding. $154 million budget, and we have to use a portable mic. Do you believe it? Anyway,
Transfer some money, buy a new one.
the gentleman that's in the, it was the last time, it's been fixed. The gentleman that's going to receive this award also is one of our two videographers for the Medford City Council. And he's coming out now in full regalia. All right, here he comes. You know, this is the best part about being an elected official, because you don't take a vote on something like this and you can't get hurt. You're here to give a commendation to someone who really deserves it. He's worked hard since 2007. He got himself involved in paramedics, EMT, Cataldo Ambulance Company, and he's worked his way up. And he's recognized at work, especially for being a hard worker, conscientious, dedicated, and a true example to his fellow workers, male and female. And there's the Star of Life right there. It's an award that's, it's not local, this is a national award. So this is what makes this very, very important. This is the resolution offered by the City Council to Richard Cormier, Star of Life recipient and award from the American Ambulance Association, National. Paramedic Ricky Cormier receiving nominations for both his work in the field and in the dispatch center. Ricky is sometimes someone who mirrors professionalism. He's well-respected, experienced, and dependable. He works proactively to resolve issues and constantly seeks improvement for himself, those around him, and Cataldo Ambulance Service. Ricky has a positive attitude while collaborating with coworkers and customers to deliver quality patient care and customer service, both as a medic and dispatcher. Often he can be seen responding to requests to fill a difficult shift on a truck or in a dispatch or on weekends and late evenings to help out. The Medford City Council congratulates Ricky Cormier on being the 2015 recipient of the Stars of Life Award by the American Ambulance Association. Again, he's one of many that just seems to keep surfacing week in and week out of individuals in our community that are just not only well respected, they're recognized for what they do, and I would hope that this becomes, Mr. Newspaper Man, wherever you are, a front page story, because this is what you call a true recognition for an award. My pleasure.
I just thank all the city councilors. Appreciate this award. We went down to Washington. It was a good time down there. Just a paramedic. I work mostly in the city of Malden. I just want to thank everybody. My parents are here tonight. Thanks for coming. All right? Get back to work, man.
Does that come with a raise? Does that come with a raise?
I don't think, no, it doesn't.
Come back.
Every day you're on TV. You're telecommuting there for a while. There you go.
Alex, you have a camera?
Whole front page.
Missed it. Breaking. You missed the breaking news.
That's in flat. Hey, Marie, that's in flat. No. You got it?
Nice to see you all. My son's gonna be starting CCD. That's where I first met you. Really? Wow. Yeah. Imagine that. Next year. See ya. Ricky.
See you Sunday.
While we're under suspension, petitions, presentations, and similar matters, 15-457, petition by Ed Barry of Medford Trains Incorporated, 17 Webster Street, Medford, Massachusetts, to exchange the following cabs. Number 6, 2005 Crown Victoria, vehicle identification number 25AWF7-1W66X108736, TA28466. Number 28, 2005 Crown Vic, VIN number 2FAHP71W15X160574, TA27020. 2, number 6, 2000 Ford Crown Vic, VIN 2FAFP71W65X108736, TA371D, and number 28, 2005 Dodge Caravan, VIN number 1D4GP24RX5B197157, TA26182. Councilor Caviello, Chairman of Licensing.
Thank you, Mr. President. I reviewed the documents and I find them in order, and motion for approval.
Second.
On the motion of approval by Councilor Caviello, seconded by Councilor Camuso, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations for your transfers.
Thank you. Good luck. Thank you, Paul.
15-458, petition for common victualers license by Yingqi Su, President, 24 Trafford Street, number 3, Quincy, Mass. 02169 for Medford Square Diner Incorporated, 38 Riverside Avenue, Medford, Mass. On file, business certificate, building department, police, fire, health, treasurer, letter of compliance, state tax ID, workman's compensation, application, etc. Chairman Caraviello for approval.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, Mr. President, I reviewed the documents. I find them all in order. And if you want to give us a little brief about your restaurant, I mean, I know you're moving into the old diner, or you could be the new diner. You're changing the name, changing the food.
My wife is Yingqi Su. She doesn't speak English too well. So
Okay.
I'll try my best to.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll say, yeah, you're going to be serving the same kind of food there. That's already.
We plan to keep like most of the items on the menu, and just try to plate it a little nicer, and then so the customers can enjoy it more. And we'll probably kicking in maybe a few Chinese food inside, like Chinese breakfast, so they will kind of give it like a a little like differences.
You can do some dim sum?
Not dim sum.
Not some dim
It's
sum.
going to be different. I'm pretty sure I haven't seen it yet in Medford.
Okay, good. Well, good luck, and hope to come by and have lunch with you one day.
Thank you.
Very good. So on the motion of approval by Council Caviello, seconded by Council Camuso, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion passes. Congratulations. Good luck.
President, we have one more taxi, Mr. President?
Do we?
Yes.
This is a table?
This was tabled, Mr. President. 15433, if we could take it off the table.
On the motion of Council Caviello to take 15433 off the table, miss a cab exchange of 2 cabs, number 47 and 48. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion's off the table and before us. Council Caviello, we read the motion. I don't have the text in front of me.
I find the papers in order, Mr. President, and move approval.
On the motion of approval by Council Caviello, seconded by Council Camuso, and this was just also for people to understand, this is a application that when somebody switches to a new physical taxi cab, a different car, to transfer the license from one to the other, they must seek approval of the council because to record the fact that the license is going from one vehicle to the other and that the new vehicle is compliant with all regulations. So we're aware of that being compliant. We have a motion for approval and it is passed. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passed. Congratulations. Drive safely.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Counselor.
While we're under suspension, can we take 15-456? I know there's some viewers at home in the Grove Street area on the mausoleum.
On the motion of Council Camuso to take paper out of order, 15456, offered by Councilor Penta, be it resolved that since some time ago the council had discussions regarding a public mausoleum, the subject needs to be addressed. Councilor Penta.
Mr. President, I think on April 8th we received a document from the Cemetery Board of Trustees regarding a meeting. And inclusive at that meeting, there was a notation from Louise Miller that indicated that a bid for construction for a public mausoleum at Oak Grove Cemetery had 3 responders. Medford City Council for years has been talking about this, and I just really feel to some degree, once again, it's the administration just ignoring the council, keeping us not only out of the loop, but completely unaware of what's going on in the loop. And the fact of the matter is, now that you're down to 3 bidders and evaluating these firms, you know, I think the council wanted to have a discussion on mausoleums, where they would be in the cemetery, having an open public forum for people to come, and then also meet with the Board of Cemetery Trustees about this. This seems like it's almost like it's a done deal. I mean, nobody has any idea. I mean, people, when I go to the cemetery, ask me where the mausoleum is. And I says, what mausoleum? I don't know anything about it. And then you have to go back, and that's what started this whole thing. And then when I went back through my papers and I saw this thing, which is dated April 8th, I just think, you know, there was something wrong. I mean, why is this council not being told on issues which generated from them? This isn't even something that we have never even talked about. This has been on here for years. We've asked, and it was going to be considered, and then we were going to get total that would be brought back to us. We have it in our discussions every time during our budget. And now we have the trustees will now read the proposal, evaluate them and rank them, and then a follow-up meeting will be discussed, which is in May. I would like to have, Mr. President, I'd like to move that the Board of Trustees meet with the Medford City Council for the purposes of discussing the mausoleums that are being suggested for Oak Grove Cemetery.
That's a fine motion, Councilor, but the Board of Trustees is the governing authority of the cemetery.
I don't really care who's the governing. I just think this city council, where this was all initiated from, deserves at least some kind of respect in return to saying, as a follow-up. It's quite similar to what Council Camuso just talked about. The answer is B paper before the A paper. Well, we talk about the mausoleums, and the city goes ahead and do it. They have bids that go out, and they have proposals to come back. That's not to say there's anything wrong with it, but where's it going to be? What part of the cemetery? You know, we are an integral part of this community, and we do fund the cemetery through our budget. So I think there is a duty of respect that's owed to the council.
Thank you. I discussed the matter with John Morgan some 27 years ago. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, I do believe that the Board of Cemetery Trustees will be meeting on June 2nd at 7 p.m. to discuss this very issue. Now, I certainly have no problem meeting with the trustees of the cemetery. However, I think that if we are in fact going to have a productive session, that this meeting should wait until after the June 2nd meeting that the cemetery trustees have with the Director of Purchasing / Budget Director to go over the RFPs and the RFQs. So with that being said, Mr. President, I have no problem having a meeting with the Board of Trustees, but I want this meeting to take place after they have their regular deliberations on the June 2nd meeting.
Thank you, Councilor Knight. Councilor Camuso.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I believe, first of all, this was initiated by Councilor Marks about 4 or 5 years ago. 4 years ago. And it was on the end of the agenda ever since. And just till recently, I believe we received the request for the $30,000 for the feasibility study from the city administration. With that being said, I think we really got to get a good understanding, too, on how the mausoleums actually work. Councilor Penta brought up a very valid point. Where exactly is it going to be? The second piece of the puzzle is I'm not quite sure if public cemeteries are in the business normally of managing a mausoleum. I know a lot of the private cemeteries, it seems, has them more than, is that fair to say, Councilor, based upon your professional? Okay, so that is true, that it's the private cemeteries that seem to have management of these a lot more than. The other thing is, too, I want to get an idea how much it's going to cost for a Medford family. Some of the numbers that you hear are pretty significant for this. So I just think we should have a meeting, and I agree with Councilor Penta, just to find out where we're going with this as a whole. As Councilor Knight did say, though, and I agree with him, this is strictly under the jurisdiction of the Cemetery Board of Trustees, unless they're looking for bonding through this City Council. That is where our official action would be needed, but I'm glad we're talking about it.
Thank you, Councilor. So on the motion of Councilor Penta, Councilor Marks.
I want to thank Councilor Penta for bringing this up tonight, and it was a resolution offered by myself a few years back, and at the time it was in direct relationship to the board, the cemetery board, stating that within a matter of 15 to 20 years that there were going to be no more burials because of a lack of burial space at the cemetery. And one way of rejuvenating and allowing for residents for the next 35 to 40 years to be buried right within their hometown was to look at limited space and the use of a mausoleum, and potentially maybe several mausoleums depending on the size and the nature and the proximity in the cemetery that they'll be located. But this is a great idea. I'm on board. I agree with my council colleagues. I think they should do their own deliberation, their own due diligence. But I also believe, as Councilor Penta mentioned, that we should have some input and some say on behalf of the residents of this community on what takes place within that community. I realize they're an autonomous board and they make their own decisions, but we're here as a legislative body, and I think it would be prudent to have the entire community as well as this body involved in the process.
Councilor Marks, so on that motion, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Report back to the regular order of business, 15-452, offered by Councilor Penta. Be it resolved that a public ascertainment hearing for Comcast held last week be discussed. Councilor Penta.
Mr. President, last Thursday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in this council chamber, an ascertainment hearing took place as it related to the Comcast contract that I believed everybody in the room that day, except the gentleman, Mr. Epstein, who was sitting up conducting the hearing, knew that the hearing or the date of April 18th, which was the ending date of the city's contract with Comcast, had been extended to July. Now, unbeknownst to all of us until we were speaking at the podium on that day, let me preface this by saying there wasn't one person here from the city administration to speak on the contract, to defend it, to defend the taxpayers, the ratepayers within this community, to the concerns that they might have as it relates to all of these particular issues. And as a result of that, there was 7 or 8 citizens. Some spoke, some didn't speak. I think 6 of them did speak. And a lot of the major concerns were as follows. But I just want to, there was a certified mail sent by the mayor of this community on April 16th, 2 days before the deadline, which was April 18th. And according to the federal law, which supersedes state law, this continuance takes place until July 3rd of this year coming up. So residents who have any concerns as it relates to Comcast, the renewal of the cable contract, have up until May 21st to submit their formal complaints to the mayor of this community, and they will be officially forwarded to the State Cable Commission in Boston, or to Mr. Peter Epstein, who is the paid consultant, legal consultant for the city. But some of the comments that were made, number one, the 10-year contract, way too long. Another part of the comments were the issuing authority taking it out of the mayor's hands and putting it into the legislative body, like it is in some other cities and towns. There's no senior citizen discount. The increase in cost just keeps going up each and every year as it relates to Comcast. And with the new addition of the technology that's out there between Amazon and Apple and a whole host of other individuals in this business, a 10-year contract would serve no purpose for the city of Medford. A 3 to a 5-year contract seems to be something that would be palatable, and it would be something that could possibly be written that could find itself with renewable terminology. Also, there was no explanation, because it never took place, of any survey that ever took place here in the city of Medford with Comcast customers over the past 10 years, whether they were satisfied, dissatisfied, or what they would like to see. Also, there was no mention of the fact that the Cable Division, Mass Cable Division indicates that ascertainment hearings need to take place within 12 months prior to the expiration date, but no later than 6 months prior to. We never had that within 12 months, and we never had that within 6 months. That's not from me. That's from the Cable Division Form 100, and that's part of their operating procedures. Also, we have the discussion on the particular perks or in-kind benefits that this mayor has received as a result of having this contract with Comcast. What was indicated at that meeting, there were 52 cities and towns throughout the country, or 52 mayors, for which we were one of them, that wrote a letter in support of having a merger between Time Warner and Comcast. The mayor was quoted in picture form in the magazines that proffer the cable industry as being a shill for Comcast, because number one, he received on an annual basis $2,500 for his annual golf tournament, and he got $10,000 a year for his celebrations committee. That in and of itself was a concern, because no one else, no ratepayer has that opportunity to get that for whatever it might be. Also, there needed to be a complete review of the records of the Public Access Corporation, minutes of the meeting, financial records, bank accounts, and all of that. That has never taken place. Comcast themselves have never taken the opportunity to review it. They've never taken an inventory of the PEG facilities, and they haven't looked at the lifespan of the equipment that they have at the same time. And there was no strategic plan to be presented for the PEG programming, and as a result of that. And the Access Corporation in and of itself needs to be in good standing by having its annual reports and its financial filings and its proper forms in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, for which they don't have. These are all things that Comcast has not done as it relates to this. Comcast has not had any public hearings themselves to encourage commentary from people, from the citizens. It was brought up at that meeting that the City Council voted on 2 separate occasions. 1, to have the public hearing, and 2, to have the public hearing at a reasonable time, which would have been 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What the mayor decided to do is to have, he canceled out the first meeting on a Thursday and forward it to the next Thursday meeting, which was last week, and still had it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because there was hardly anybody here. People were working, and some people who were here, including myself, felt that that was a slight. And it was a slight. It was a slight to the ratepayers within this community. There was nothing by way of a document that would indicate that a survey was taken by Comcast for the purposes of ascertaining community needs. And the results of the survey were not included or submitted to the issuing authority. In this particular case was the mayor. Usually the way it will go, the town usually sends out an RFP, or in this particular case, if we're talking about a renewal to the contract, then that renewal to the contract generally takes about 30 to 90 days for the issuing authority to review it. And then 4 months after the issuing authority reviews it, the proposal from the cable contractor or the operator at that point in time can once again be received. The city does not have to accept it. The city can send it back. The city can reject it, or they can consider the contract in a shorter term of period in time. The new legislative landscape on this particular negotiation on long-term contracts has now been considered to be anywhere from 3 to 5 to 7 years. I think that would be something that could be palatable if the terminology was written in there that that inclusive of that language, there would be a review done by Comcast for the things that we talked about that they haven't been doing. The commercial districts were brought up. Council Marx's indication relative the lack of connectivity to certain parts of the square. That was brought up. That was a point brought up, I believe, by 2 other individuals as well as myself. That in and of itself really showed that Comcast has not gone out of its way for the purposes of connectivity. Again, it's another failing on their part to make sure that the city was completely and totally hooked up for Comcast. They indicated also, too, that the reducing of INET expenses or negotiating for cable modem installations, which is more and the least costly, could be challenged by the 6 megahertz channels, which are high definition channels to the cable operator. There was also the request that we could avoid agreeing with the cable operator's right to reclaimed unused channel time. That's one thing I believe that Comcast has done through the years. If a cable channel is not being used, they've reclaimed it and they've put it into a higher tier. Those are some of the issues in an overview that took place in that particular meeting. Once again, if anybody, oh yeah, strike that. And also, lastly, performance review hearings. The request to hold hearings on an annual or as-needed basis contractually obligate the cable operator's attendance. That has never been done. That has never been done by Comcast. So these were the things, these were the nuts and bolts, these were the ingredients that were talked about and presented. There was a stenographer here, and I don't know if I'm going to wait to make sure that she recorded everything, because I will be submitting a copy of what I just got through talking about. But anyone who might be watching who has a displeasure or a pleasure, whether you like them or don't like them, you can write of the city as the issuing authority and tell them what you think on or before May 21st, because that will then be submitted to the Mass Cable Regulatory Agency. And then at that point in time, I believe the city will then go into the process of negotiating. Another part of the comment that was made to Mr. Epstein was the fact that since the mayor will no longer be the mayor, that we asked that no contract become operative and effective until next year after a new mayor has been selected, to give that person the opportunity. Gave the example of the same situation taking place right now, where the Director of Public Works, when they went through the whole process, they're now not hiring a Director of Public Works. They're waiting for the new mayor to come on board so that mayor can do the hiring of the Public Works. With that being said, Mr. President, I believe that's somewhat of a general overview of what took place at the hearing. And once again, I just think it was an out-and-out shame that the mayor refused to have that hearing at nighttime to give many citizens an opportunity to come and speak and to relate their concerns. You know, if you're going out of office and you really want to leave the ship, why would you want to do that to the taxpayers of this community? I don't know why, but unfortunately he did. But at least some of us had an opportunity. And I will leave by saying the following: not one person who represents this city, administration or otherwise, came to that meeting to express their concerns, complaints, compliments, or what have you, in behalf of the cable TV subscribers. And that was a damn shame. Thank you. I was there, yes.
So on the motion of Councilor Penta to receive and place on file?
No. The motion is going to be to have anybody who has a concern as it relates to Comcast, whether they're for it or against it, for or against a 10-year contract, to write their concerns to the issuing authority as it presently stands, which is the mayor, for the purposes of having them duly recorded before any contract is signed.
The clerk has that. Before any contract is signed.
Or negotiated for.
Or negotiated for. On that motion, Councilor Caraviello.
Thank you. I want to thank Councilor Penta for being the only councilor to be there. I had intended to be there last week, but I'm on another committee that I had to be in Boston for another meeting with something else. And it's a shame that, when Councilor Penta told me Nobody from the city showed up to represent us there, other than Councilor Penta. Nobody from the office, which is, I thought it was just unheard of that no one, not even a token person showed up. Yeah, it's a shame, Mr. President. Other shame.
Thank you, Councilor Caraviello. Welcome, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. Joe Villone, 59 Garfield Ave, Medford, Mass. I want to thank Councilor Penta and Councilor Caraviello. His heart was in the right place. Councilor Penta did show up, as Councilor Camuso just noted, and it's true. We had one representative from the city, and I appreciate that. We need a second hearing. We really do, because I went door to door prior to the hearing in Haynes Square. Businesses did not know. People did not know. A woman at one of the banks was like, I want to be there. They didn't know. And Comcast is a big issue. It's not about public access per se. It's about the whole thing. As you may know, Verizon paid $4.4 billion for AOL. This went down yesterday, today. AOL was part of Time Warner. Comcast was Time Warner. Now, you know, they're all trading secrets. They all know what each other is doing. It's a whole new world, and 10 years is just not appropriate. So we need a second hearing. Now, people out there, after the hearing, Sports Host, Johnny Byers, and myself went over to Mary Merrill's office. She's such a good person. And we submitted the letters, which Mr. Epstein took, and City Hall time-stamped them. So it's just making sure that they got the letter. You can bring letters to City Hall, either to Linda Coletti's office or Mary Merrill's office. Please, people, write your letters about Comcast, good or bad. Note to the mayor that we want a public access station. It's very important the citizens of this community get a little proactive. Everyone in this room, just write a letter. You don't have to be there. But we need a second hearing, and I thank the City Council for your vote 7-0 to have it at 6:30. What's the problem with giving the people some time to talk to Comcast? Tim Kelly was sitting here. I spoke to him after the presentation. The fellow from Comcast. It's just very important for the citizens to know the landscape. They want a 10-year deal. They've got to get to know us. So Comcast, shame on them for not demanding the mayor have it at 6:30, because other towns in this Commonwealth had the meeting at an appropriate hour, 7 o'clock, 6:30. I don't know why that didn't happen. The equipment for TV3, where is it? The City Council can ask this for another hearing. We have the hearing with Comcast. We asked for an accounting of the equipment. And keep this in mind. It's going to be a long meeting tonight, so I'm going to end with this. 175 days to Election Day. 175 days. No public access TV station. Mr. D'Antonio said to me, Joe, that's 3 elections. I said, no, that's more than that. That's 3 mayoral elections if we don't have one this time around. What about the elections in between? So candidates want to get their word out. Citizens want to speak, and I know Johnny wants to do a sports show. And hey, I've got all sorts of shows. You know that. I'm producing all the time. Come on, Medford. It's time.
For approval, Council Penta.
One quick thing. I also included, as part of the documents, resolutions 15306, 15393, and 15434. These are the 3 resolutions from the council making the request not to go into a 10-year contract and making the request that the hearings take place at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 15306, 15393, and 15434. You got it? 15306, 15393, and 15434. 434.
434. So on that motion, all those in favor?
Roll call.
And a roll call has been requested.
Yes, the amendment to the paper is that any concerns for or against during the hearing, for the hearing, be forwarded to the mayor before any negotiation or contract be signed. You want the public to forward any?
to forward to the mayor's
Concerns
office.
for or against,
Any compliments for or against issues as it relates to the Comcast renewal
mayor.
on or before May 21st, and before any contract or negotiations begin.
negotiations,
Right.
the contract we sign.
Right.
And attached to that were the three motions
Right,
that
right.
you just enumerated
Right.
for us, that were all related to the matter, Council Knight. Council Knight.
Last week's motion was, that we all voted on, the past 7-0, I believe, was that the mayor not enter into a new contract until, not enter a 10-year contract with Comcast until a new mayor is selected and sworn in. And now this resolution is,
Well, the reason why the resolution is coming up now, because the extension that that the mayor sent out on April 16th, he sent this by certified mail and facsimile, and this is an addendum to that for which it took place. And as Mr. Kelly said, any and all information, they welcome it because this is what they have to negotiate on.
On the motion for approval by Council Penta, roll call has been requested.
can you just explain
Counselor?
to me how, the A portion is to provide the information to the mayor's office, correct? The B portion of the paper, can you read that back just one more time, please?
The B portion is the three resolutions, 15306, 15...
No, you said, the first part was that all the citizens send their emails and everything else to the mayor.
Concern, yeah, to the mayor, and that the mayor
He has to
not
forward...
negotiate or enter into contract before these papers are received for May 21st hearing, is that it?
No, he can't do that anyway. The thing
Can't
is...
do them anyways?
All papers for or against have to be submitted to the mayor on or before May 21st. That's the deadline for filing, okay? This contract goes to July 3rd. Subsequent to May 21st and after July 3rd, that's when the mayor, or if he so chooses to go forward and negotiate a contract, this is all the information we want included. This is what Mr. Kelly said. As much as you give them and send forth between now and then, they have to consider that.
Okay, so we're adding July 20, we're adding
July
the July
3rd.
date to this, okay.
July 3rd is the extension date ending. July
I have
3rd.
no problem with providing the information, Mr. President, or giving the residents a problem to provide the information. However, I haven't moved off my position that I don't think that we should enter into a new 10-year contract, as we voted on last week. So with that being said, maybe we let the resolution stand from last week because they're contradictory at this point in time.
They are.
That's your opinion.
Well, one of them says for the mayor not to enter into a contract, and the other one says to let the mayor enter into a contract, so...
No, we're not letting him enter a contract. What you're doing is you have to read the law, and the law is very specific as it relates to this particular contract. He has now signed the extension. By having the extension signed and having the ascertainment hearing after the fact, not before the fact, that has presented multiple of issues. Before, you or I, nobody had any opportunity to explain or express ourselves. Now, since they have the ascertainment hearing, even though it's after the fact, this all has to be taken in consideration. So if you don't want to vote for it, vote.
No, well, I'm saying that's fine, let it be taken into consideration, but has this council moved off its position that they don't want the mayor...
Well, maybe they're
to enter into a
reaffirming its
contract?
position because, nobody came here, so at least we want to reaffirm. You don't want to vote for it, you don't have to vote
No,
for it.
I just want to be clear as to what we're voting for.
Well, I'm just reaffirming my
I don't want to vote
position.
for four separate resolutions that are all contradictory each other and that are in direct contradiction to the rules that we have, or we disposed of an item that's substantially similar.
It's not being disposed. What you're doing is you're amending the original one, and it's an entirely different resolution.
Cute,
Mr.
but I
Clerk,
don't think
please
so.
call the roll. Councilor Camuso?
We're still waiting on an opinion from the city solicitor that we asked for probably several months ago. This whole thing could be moot if the Medford City Council injects a rescission of the original vote that was taken way back when. We asked for a ruling, whether it was a new contract or an extension of the contract, or if it was by home rule petition, or if it was by a separate law. And I believe we're still waiting for that opinion from the solicitor. He's been very busy providing us other opinions, but that one, I think, should be put to the front of the list, where this is something that's ongoing right now.
Yes. So on the motion of Council Penta for approval, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll. Motion to sever by Councilor Knight.
Okay, so we're severing the comment section?
Correct. So we're calling the roll on the,
Well, did the chair rule that this is contradictory to the vote last week? You did say that you agreed. I'm just asking a question of the chair, Counselor. It's not reaffirming, it's
but then
changing.
we've disposed of it already. Very good.
The
So we're
extension, the
separating-
extension was signed on April 15th, right? Yeah, and the ascertainment hearing was May.
So you had the hearing, and as a result of the hearing, that's all this information, everything that they didn't do, they were supposed to.
So the vote on the comment section first. Please call the roll, Mr. Clerk.
Yes.
Yes. Counsel Knight. Yes. Vice President Kern. Counsel Marks. Yes. Counsel Penta. Yes. President Del Russo.
Yes. The vote of 6 in the affirmative, 1 absent. Motion passes. The second vote is on. Reaffirming the 3 prior resolutions. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Counsel Caruso.
Yes.
Counsel Caviello.
Yes.
Counsel Knight. No, Mr. President, I asked the record to reflect that I voted
Based on the issue of redundancy.
Thank you. So noted.
Counsel Marks. Yes. Counsel Penta.
Yes.
President Del Russo.
No. With a vote of 4 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative, 1 absent, the motion passes. (15)454, offered by Councilor Penta. Be it resolved that the mayor and city engineers' failure to respond to council resolution regarding the EPA proposed MS4 permitting be reviewed for passage. Councilor Penta.
Mr. President, 15083 was presented before the city council some 2 months ago, and the unfortunate part about it is we're starting to go through all these resolutions that are not being responded to. I don't know why either the mayor or the city engineer has refused to do this, refused to respond to it. 85 cities and towns have now signed on to this. Today I attended a Mass Municipal Board meeting, and one of their highlights is this MS4 permitting, process that the EPA is forthcoming. As a matter of fact, today it was recognized for the first time that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is complimenting cities and towns who are taking a stand on this particular position and challenging the EPA, the federal EPA, on this particular mandate, which is not only going to be costly, it's going to be almost prohibitive for the city and town to do this within the next 5 years. It's in excess of 13, I believe, over $20 billion entity as it's going to relate upon the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This is nothing more than having our city engineer write a letter in support of our community, sister communities. She doesn't believe what I'm saying. We're a member of MMA. She can call them up and ask them, what it's all about. She can check in with their environmental committee. All we're doing is requesting the APA that since the proposed MS4 stormwater sewer system permit would require communities to institute more advanced stormwater testing, monitoring, and management programs, but is completely silent on funding or mitigation of the additional costs to communities. And since there is no flexibility in the compliance portion of the requirements, and since communities are grappling with these huge financial challenges, with preliminary projections to be in excess of $800,000 per year per community, we ask the EPA to defer action on the submission of a notice of intent until municipalities have had the opportunity to engage the regulatory agencies in an open dialogue regarding these onerous and unaffordable permit requirements. And then it goes on and explains, and it gives a whole list of these things. And I just don't understand why we have not received, I think it was Council Knight I think in the beginning, you sort of like okayed with that, and you said, can we just send it upstairs, and let's see if we can get an answer back. Well, we haven't gotten an answer back from her. And this is too important of an issue. They did a survey of Massachusetts cities and towns. This was their second highest priority through Mass Municipal Association, for which we are a member, and we are a paid dues member within that community. This is huge. This is huge as it relates to an infrastructure problem here in the city of Medford as it relates to our water and sewer, especially our stormwater and sewer provisions. This is a very aggressive attitude being taken by the EPA. What the Commonwealth of Massachusetts doing, and the Baker administration, and the Commonwealth's EPA program, they're asking for a long-term, at least a minimum of a 20-year program that forecasts out cities and towns to go at this at a reasonable pace and at a reasonable cost. The city of Medford cannot afford $800,000 a year to correct all its stormwater provisions. That's minimum. Could even be more on that. We have things going on upstairs, excuse me, in our water and sewer department that's going to be costing us probably into the millions with a new program that they're going to be coming up on, a leak detection program. And then what do we look at that? How's the priority run against that, against this? Mr. President, I'm asking that we as a city, or our Medford City Council, go forward with a letter of support, forward this to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts EPA, and letting them know that we support their proposal for forecasting this over a longer period of time, having an educational program for which there is none being offered by the federal EPA, and at the same time give cities and towns an opportunity to forecast their financial program to engage in this program. Also, there are 5 coalitions of eastern Massachusetts towns which make up over 85 communities that surround us, that are looking into combining their services, their expertise, and whatever it takes to reduce the individual city and town burden to get through this process. So, again, going through all our resolutions that haven't been answered, there's a whole host of them. If this is the mayor's intent to just leave and just ignore this council, or have a department head ignore this council on this most important issue, shame on all of them. This is too important an issue. It affects every single taxpayer, water and sewer projection, water and sewer ratepayer in this particular community. So I ask approval, Mr. President.
Second.
And if you want, I'll read the entire resolution.
No thanks.
Approval by Councilor Penta. Councilor Knight.
Is the text of the resolution the text that the gentleman proposes be included in the letter?
In the resolution. Yes, that's the exact text.
On that motion?
Mr. President, I certainly can understand the councilor's concern, and I can understand where he's coming from, and I think that this is also going to be a very costly endeavor. However, I'm reading the language of the letter, and I think that we might be better served coming across as a unanimous body that sits down and drafts a letter to the EPA as a group for something that we can all wholeheartedly support. Based on the language that's in the underlying resolution, I can't support it. However, I'm more than willing to sit down, maybe in committee or in committee of the whole, and we can come down and put a draft together, Mr. President, or maybe even going a step further, where there are 5 stormwater coalitions that have gotten together and that have actually done some work on this together. Maybe we have one of them come in and share their expertise with us and help us draft a letter that's going to really hit the points, the high points that we need to hit, number one. And number 2, also provide us with a little bit more information as to how a regional stormwater coalition would work and whether or not that's in the best interest of the city of Medford.
And maybe it would be helpful to have our city engineer as part of that conversation, because there might be something going on about it that we haven't been apprised of for whatever reason.
Mr. President, with all due respect to the city engineer who's had this for over 2 months and not being responsive to it, as well as other issues that are sitting up there, I just think, and I don't understand if Council Knight has a problem with the words, what's the problem with the words?
I find them to be somewhat inflammatory, and if I got a letter like that sitting on my desk when I was at work, I'd look at the thing and I'd scratch my head and I'd say, who are these nuts that are sending it to me? You know, you look at the language in there and it's
well, what's the language? Which one?
It seems very divisive. It seems very argumentative. It seems very...
How can it be? Well, read the language. You're just using terminology. What words don't you like? What sentence don't you like in here?
The aggressive schedule the EPA poses, in absence of EPA leadership.
Right now, in the federal government, there is an absence in leadership. There is nobody there at the helm for the purposes of making this a direction. So this is coming from Washington down, and if you talk to the Commonwealth of
Translate
Massachusetts...
into another harmful and unfunded mandate on cities, towns, and taxpayers.
It is.
I just feel as though the tone's argumentative. I feel like it starts us
I
off
got to
on
move,
the wrong
Mr. President,
foot.
move on the question. Because
Move
I don't
the
think
question.
I don't think it's argumentative. I think it needs to be done. You know,
On
if
the
if
motion
85
of Councilor Penta for approval, all those in favor?
Roll call vote, Mr.
A
President.
roll call vote has been requested. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
No, Mr. President, please record me in opposition, and the reason being I oppose the language, but I agree in principle.
Yes.
No. With the vote of 4 in the affirmative, 2 in the negative, and 1 absent, the motion carries. Motion for suspension of the rules to take the budget. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Can we do the
Motion
last
carries.
resolution?
Budget is before us. We had presented to us the budget,
Mr. President.
15,460. Councilor Camuso.
As a result of not having our answers for the transfers, motion to table the budget.
The motion to table the budget is undebatable. All those in favor?
Roll call vote.
Roll call has been requested. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll to table the budget, 15,460, as presented to the Medford City Council. On the motion of Councilor Camuso to table the budget for the reason being the failure of the administration to update the council on the proper financial requests.
Yes.
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 Yes, in the vote of 6 in the affirmative, 1 absent, the motion carries.
Motion to revert back.
The motion by Councilor Camuso to revert back to the regular order of business. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Councilor Carafiello.
Revert, there's a citizen that would like to speak.
While we're into suspension, ma'am, would you please
Thank you, Mr. President.
present yourself to the podium and please state your name and address for the record.
Sure. I'm Sharon Diasso. I'm a resident of Medford, and I live at the corner of Mass Ave and Circuit Road. Thank you for a few minutes. I didn't realize we were going to have an elongated meeting, but they certainly are important issues. On a lighter note, from all of this business that's been going on, I came down for a couple of thank yous to some people who work in the city. And one of the thank yous has sort of a prelude. It's a story. In 5 years ago, at the corner of Mass Ave and Governor's Avenue, there's a very kind of unique lot of woods and boulders. Everyone who goes up Governor's Avenue, I'm sure, has seen it. We residents know it very well, although I'm a longtime resident of Judkins Road. Go walking there now, it's loaded with trash, barrels, debris, doggy bags, dead trees, glass, poison ivy growing out all into the street. So 5 years ago, I wrote a letter and went down to the safety meeting at the police station because my friend's husband's car was totaled by a motorist coming around the corner. Then they were cutting across Hutchins Road past Governor's and almost causing accidents. A few of us almost hit children on bicycles because you couldn't see through the trees. It seems like a moot point, but one of the comments tonight was made by a couple of the councilors about other things that are much larger than this. It's Medford. Why does it take 5 years to clear a lot out like that, posing a hygienic, hazard and also a safety hazard? We're even told in the classrooms, even at the college, that what's the first thing that happens when you come in the door as an instructor? Safety first. That's the first thing. So with that in mind, we waited. We wrote more letters. We went down. We were told at one of the safety meetings that we had to run it by, the letter had to go before the tree people. So I said, is a dead tree equated with the life of a little kid on a bike? Is that what you're waiting for, someone to really get hurt? So time went by, winters came, went. Finally, last year, I went to City Hall, to Mike Nestor's department. He happened to be there. And I know that anger creates more anger, so I was trying to be my best behaved that day. The secretary was taking notes, and Mr. Nestor said, I'm overhearing what you're saying, and I had no idea this problem existed up there. So thank you, Mr. Nestor, and your assistant, I think his name is Dennis. Is it Dennehy? They met me 2 weeks later with the group. I think they were prisoners, and those guys were real happy to be out that day. They asked me, how's this look, how's that look? They cleared everything out to the point where the poor lady over there got all her kitchen windows exposed. But she said she's loving it because she doesn't have to look out on and smell horrible stuff. But this is Medford. Why does it take 5 years? We said, well, maybe the city trucks are busy. We were giving every kind of naive, benefit of the doubt. We're like, we don't see city trucks. They're not look busy to us. But he sent them out there, and thank you, Mr. Nestor, again. We now can see through the corner with what he removed, and I go there myself once a week now, and I take out any type of extra debris that's gone. The neighbors are loving it. On that note of safety, last year, I came down here only on the suggestion of a friend who saw me weeks later. I fell so hard on Forest Street on a sidewalk that I broke my 2 front teeth, and I sprained my shoulder and had to wear a leg brace for 2 months. I fell so hard that a constable coming by was kind enough to get me off the sidewalk because I couldn't get up. So I want to thank you for reviewing that case for me and for going in consideration with what I had to pay to reconstruct my front teeth. On that note, when I came to visit, I think it was Councilwoman Brianna Luongo, there was supposed to be an audit to the sidewalks. So I'm coming here tonight to find out if that audit indeed was ever begun. Because since I fell, I've heard on talk radio and also 2 other cases before this council of older people who have fallen, have had to have shoulder surgery. It's Medford. Can't we fix the sidewalks? It's bad enough the poor policemen have to live in a bad hygiene situation in a police station. You can't even walk at night. My neighbor won't walk the dogs at night anymore because he's too afraid of tripping over the broken sidewalks. So I happened to read in the newspaper that the state legislature recognized the adverse effect the past winter had on our city's infrastructure as well in the DPW budget, said Donato. These funds will go a long way in helping Medford residents see necessary street and road repairs, costly damage caused by this winter's weather. So does this mean that the budget money that you were questioning before, Mr. President, if it does come, I've never read another piece of news since this was announced, is that only for weather-beaten streets and sidewalks, or is this going to be a combination of hazardous walking? And thank you for your time. Sorry to bother you.
No bother at all. Thank you for coming up. And we're going to send the question to the DPW regarding the audit of the sidewalks and the supplemental funds and their disbursement for the purpose of. So the resolution is the resolution by Councilor Camuso to get an update on the sidewalk assessment and audit for repairs, and the supplemental funds delivered by Representative Donato, how they're being dispersed and in what areas for repairs of streets and sidewalks due to the excessive damage from the past record-breaking winter.
Thank you. Would that mean that also, President Delarusso, that they also would address just weather-beaten sidewalks, or what happens to all the sidewalks that are causing all the falls in the city, sir? What would happen? That would be covered under the audit?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thanks. I thought it was important. Also, in the light of this, with the spending, we have a very fine engineering department, I'm sure. Would they participate in this repair, or do these jobs go out on bids? I mean, it seems to me that we have very apt people as personnel who can work on this. I'm just hoping it doesn't go out for a huge bid and that every penny of this is spent. When we have people on the payrolls who are very capable of doing this, I compliment them again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So on the motion for approval by Council Camuso, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations. Thank you, Sharon, for coming up tonight. While we're on to suspension, motions, orders, and resolutions, 15-459, petition by Jean Martin, 10 Cumming Street, to speak on community policing. Ms. Martin, please state your name and address for the record.
Absolutely. Jean Martin, 10 Cumming Street. And it's hard to follow somebody that's very grateful because that very seldom happens here. So I want to thank I want to thank that lady for coming forward, and I hope more people come forward when things are done right in the city and they give us compliments or give you guys compliments when things go right. Community policing is what I'd like to talk about, and I'm a believer in the broken windows theory of policing, which is to say that if I see one word of graffiti on a wall, I can bet that shortly thereafter it'll be covered with graffiti. And people are much less likely to litter on a well-kept lawn than on a yard that has 1 foot of high grass. So when people maintain their property, it is less likely that somebody's just going to throw a can of soda on that lawn if it's well-kept. The question is, though, is what to do with these offenders. Booking someone and creating a record for them is detrimental to their future employment and housing. While once just a punk who spray painted a wall soon snowballs into a real criminal, especially if he or she spent any time in a more seasoned criminals in a prison system. I would recommend that we look at new reforms in the city to keep small criminals from becoming a full-blown criminal by making the punishment fit the crime, i.e., if someone spray paints on a wall, we make him or her paint a bathroom in one of our many city buildings. So they get the punishment. They have to clean up the wall that they spray painted if we catch them, and they also have to do something else on top of that to pay for the crime that they committed so that they're held accountable, and yet they don't get a record. Because once the person gets a record, then it just snowballs into more inappropriate behavior, and the negativity just rolls on. So that's different than violent crimes. Please don't mistake this for violent criminal activity. I'm talking about small stuff like broken windows. If a kid breaks a window and then you see another kid break a window, if you catch them, I think that we should make them wash all these windows in the city hall. So not only do they have to pay for the window that they broke, but make them wash the city windows in the city hall. And that way they pay society back, they don't get a record, and we hopefully keep them from doing other stupid stuff. There are many components to community policing: neighborhood watches, having police walk the beat in the squares and parks. The police officers, not just the chief of police, need to be invited to churches, community centers, clubs, Rotary, and every other formal and informal setting so that we see the police as part of the community and part of the solution, not the problem. Police officers are human. I know that's a shock. And if we don't personally know a police officer, we tend to forget that. Police officers also have husbands, wives, and children that are affected by the unique work that a police officer has and does. So when we advocate for the police, we are also advocating for their families. The stress officer suffers from a bad day is often felt by his or her family. Another component to community policing is the need for more women officers. Women officers can be extremely helpful in cases of domestic violence, prostitution, rape of men, women, and children. Women officers are needed for women detainees to ensure women's detainees' safety remains intact. Women are also much more better at verbal skills to de-escalate a situation between two parties. And that skill is going to be needed more in the future. That said, women officers must stay above reproach in order to hold that public trust in these most sensitive of areas like family disputes and physical assault. Our police in general must also stand tall and be held to a higher standard than the general population, for they are the only ones given the charge and power to hold someone against their will. They not only carry a weapon of deadly force, but are trained in deadly force. Their body, hence, is a weapon of deadly force. I know that this topic is not an easy one, but as for the black community, I am not sure that just hiring black officers will change the status of the black community in law enforcement and criminal justice. Therefore, I am proposing the following: that the city agrees to appoint 3 volunteers from the black community and at least 2 volunteers from the white community to hold the official office of advocate whenever a black person is punished off the books or arrested for any charge. These volunteers must, however, and I do stress must, be viewed by the entire city as valid representatives on behalf of the city and black people of Medford. Their role is to ensure the fair treatment of the system within the law enforcement community. These advocates' intentions will not be questioned because they will have no monetary gain from their positions. The names of the 5 advocates must be listed on the Medford website and seen by every officer from top to bottom as legitimate. A minister or other leaders in the NAACP and possibly one from the Haitian community could be a beginning start for that. And there is a minister in the West Medford Church that's a white guy, and he's very, very good, and I would recommend his name for one of the 2 positions. He's in that West Medford Baptist Church over there. Another type of community policing which needs to be explored is communication during power outage, like organizing ham radio civilian operators. Thinking outside the box. If our cell towers go down for a weather event or electricity goes down, ham operators could become one of the only forms of communication that we have. So they could be included. Everything must be on the table to overcome an assault by weather events, mass events, or local crimes. The arts and a bike trail, like you said, Mr. Marks, using the library as a shared space for the arts, because I believe that we need to create new ways of looking at old problems. And the people that can do that is the arts community. So I really am on that. I don't believe in the spring step thing, but I do believe that the library could be elevated or reused completely for that purpose or shared with the library. Community policing is a much larger concept than the old way of just catch a thief policing. We have an increased population who, when they commit a small crime, end up living a life of crime. And there are methods to stop this from happening, but we have to work together as a community. And as far as the bike path, I would like to actually see a bike path from Tufts University down to Medford Square to help, because the young people from there could actually add energy to this problem as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Martin. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much. Ms. Martin, I did want to touch on something that you opened up with, and that was, you know, the theory or the situation where if someone gets caught spray painting on the street, that they'd be responsible to come back into the community and do some painting or something like that. And I wanted to make you aware of a bill that's pending before the Massachusetts State Legislature that was filed by our representative, Sean Garbley. And this bill would authorize what's called restorative justice. And the principles behind restorative justice are rather interesting. And the way that it works is, you know, the people that are most affected by the crime, the graffiti, would actually benefit collectively from the corrective action that's taken by the perpetrator after they're caught. So I don't want to get into too much detail about restorative justice and the pros and cons and the theories behind it, but I did want to make you aware of the fact that there is some legislation pending at the House of Representatives. Representative Gobley is the lead sponsor on the bill in the House, and I believe Senator Eldridge is the lead sponsor in the Senate. And I suggest if you're really interested in doing a little bit more research, you give Representative Gobley a call, and I'm sure he'd be happy to talk with you about it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So on the motion of Councilor Knight that the paper be received and placed on file, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion carries. We have a couple papers in the hand of the President, and we're getting to yours. Offered by President Del Russo, be it resolved that the mayor further update the police patrol fleet with new vehicles. If I might, from the chair, it's pretty clear. We need more police cars. We need new police cars. 343 has had a dent on it for several months, incurred from an altercation the automobile had during the blizzard. We need more new police cars, please, Mr. Mayor. So on that motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. by Councilor Marks, be it resolved that the Medford High School and Medford Vocational Technical High School headmaster, teachers, staff, and Medford community be recognized for recently receiving a full accreditation for a 10-year period from the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. They used to call it NEASC. Councilor Marks.
That's correct, Mr. President. They still call it NEASC. In September of 2014, NEASC, which is the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, visited Medford High School and Medford Vocational Technical High School, and Medford received the best possible rating by the association for a full 10-year accreditation. And I think it's only appropriate, Mr. President, that we thank Dr. Perella, the headmaster, who has done yeoman's work up at that high school in gaining the confidence and improving the curriculum at the high school, and also the new director of the vocational school, who has also done yeoman's work. The teachers, without good teachers and teachers that care, this accreditation wouldn't be what it was, Mr. President. And the parents and the Medford community as a whole really had the whereabouts to make sure that issues were addressed. You know, we addressed the science labs, which were prior to new science labs, we were in fear of accreditation or being reaccredited, and that came to fruition. New computers back, I think it was 2.5, 3 years ago, throughout the school system, and a host of initiatives that have been put forward by Dr. Perello, the teachers, and the Medford community at large. And I just want to congratulate everyone in the system, including the superintendent of schools, Mr. President, who has been at the forefront for many years in public education. And it's a new day and a new dawn in this community, and I look forward to a future bright and one that attracts students back from outside placements and outside settings back to where they belong within our own Medford Public Schools, Mr. President.
Thank you for that resolution. So on the motion of approval by Councilor Marks, on that motion, Councilor Penta.
I want to thank Councilor Marks for bringing that up, but I would also like to, we haven't got a response back to the scuttlebutt that seems to be now emanating more and more of some kind of a merger between the high school and the vocational school. And I think we need a report back from that. There was a school committee person here tonight. I thought she was going to talk on it, but I don't know, she left. But that's neither here or there. I think it's very important to note if in fact, and from what I understand, that this is emanating from the high school side, not from the vocational school side. So a lot of the teachers in the vocational school are pretty upset over the fact that, you know, they haven't been put into the loop, they haven't been part of the discussions. So if vocational education is going to survive in the city of Medford, this needs to take place. I think the community needs to know what's going on. For whatever the proposal might be and the discussions that might be going on, you have to put all the parties together. We asked for a joint meeting with the school committee. They've yet to respond. They probably won't respond because they don't want to answer the questions when we ask them. These are hard questions. And, you know, if it's a proposal and it sounds good, well, let's all hear about it. But I don't think in a maze of, you know, an executive decision or executive administrators, they make this decision and the whole vocational school now becomes an entirely different, you know, territory, so to speak, as compared to what the high school has to offer. So again, Mr. Clerk, I know you have it on there. I'll probably repeat my request again, that we get a report back. What, if anything, is the issue regarding a merger use between the high school and the vocational school as it relates to an incorporation of these classes, these classes, because that's what it is. The word seems to be they're only going to keep 3 of the vocational school courses that are certified by the Commonwealth, and the rest just become electives to some degree that a kid from the high school can take and have it merge. And that to me, would just destroy the whole idea of vocational school. And then what are you going to do about all these kids, you know, that go to Minuteman? I mean, where's the increased cost that they're going to take place if we start shipping kids to another vocational school, because we're not going to be offering them the full-time services of a vocational school? So I think it's paramount we get an answer back. You know, they can have the certification. They deserve the certification. They worked for it. But now if it's a new day dawn coming up to be, I think we need to know.
So on the motion of approval by Councilor Marks,
more,
amended by Councilor Penta.
And also, Mr. President, during this past week, there was a fire up at the high school. And to the best of my knowledge, unfortunately, the fire department does not have a Knox box system that they used to have, which would have enabled them to get into the building without breaking windows and going through. And also, if we're on this whole issue of the high school, why is there a full-time fire person there? Because the fire alarm system still is inoperative, I believe, on the 3rd floor of the building. These are important questions. Do you realize what the cost is to put a fireman there every single day to be a watchdog? Because the alarm systems aren't working, or it isn't working like it's supposed to concurrently, you know, within the whole building. Can we get a report back on this, Mr. President? If we make these side papers, if you want B and C papers.
I'm sorry.
Well, we'll do them as amendments. Councilor
Yeah.
Marks?
Mr. President, just if I could, and I appreciate what Councilor Penta just mentioned about the separation of the vocational school and the high school. And I could tell you there's not a stronger advocate in the city as a former graduate of Medford Vocational Technical High School for vocational education in this city. But I can tell you what I experienced back so many years ago, that as a member of the vocational, or student at the vocational school, there was always a clear separation. Vocational kids never went past a certain set of doors, never mingled with high school kids. Our lunches were separate. The outside activities, the recesses were separate. Everything was always separate. And I think there's a movement now, and I'm not privy to any more information than anyone else is, but there's a movement underway starting from the new science labs, which the initiative took place about 2 years ago, to incorporate vocational education somewhat outside of the confines of the vocational school, which we all know is pretty much 2 hallways on 2 floors in the entire building. And I see it as a very positive initiative to include vocational kids with the new science labs, to possibly open the curriculum to vocational kids that never had an option, Mr. President. And I, as one, worked in the trade for a period of time and decided a trade wasn't for me and went back to school and got a degree. And I think that's what they're trying to instill in within our vocational school. And I rather see 3 or 4 shops in the vocational school that are solid shops attracting students than to have a host of shops that really don't attract many students, and you don't want to go into them because there's no future in what the offerings are. And I think there's a need to expand up there. There's a need to offer state-of-the-art equipment. There's a need to look at the current offerings up there, and I think that's what they're doing now. And I, as one person, welcome that. I know when I was at the vocational school, we used to have a week of shop and a week of related. And I think over the years, you know, the people much more educated than I said, you know what, we can no longer really have kids in the shop for 1 week because they're not getting the education that they need. You know, people think you go into a vocational education, you don't need the education. Let me tell you, a lot of kids I went to school with, they open their own business. And guess what? When you open your own business, it's not just a matter of turning a screw or hammering a nail. It's a matter of doing the finances. It's a matter of doing the bookkeeping. It's a matter of doing the workers' compensation, health care, and everything else involved with opening a business, especially a small business. And we have to make sure we educate these students, not just on the trade aspect, but also in the educational aspect and the aspect of opening a business or working in a company and so forth. And I think that's what the vocational school's poised to do. And I hope there's going to be a lot of dialogue, but I see it as a very positive thing, and I'm sure my council colleague does too. But, you know, we haven't heard the nuts and bolts of this, but there is something coming forward, and I think we're going to see some changes, and change is healthy, in my opinion. From what I see, it's necessary within our vocational school to keep it up to the 21st century, provide the state-of-the-art offerings, and take back the 100 or so kids that go to Lexington Minuteman because the offerings that we have are inadequate, to be quite honest with you. And I see it as positive, and I look forward to the discussion and dialogue, and I'm sure the school committee is something they're working on. But this is a positive thing, and the interaction of vocational students with high school students and the use of the equipment and the technology, vice versa, works both ways. And I see this as a win-win, Mr. President, and I look forward to it.
Thank you, Councilor Marks. Councilor Knight.
Mr. President, thank you very much. And Councilor Marks, thank you for your words, because I too remember that imaginary line down the middle of Medford High School that, you know, if you opened the doors and stepped into the vocational school from Medford High, you'd think that alarms were going to go off and someone was going to come and put you in detention. I'm a firm believer in integration and inclusion, Mr. President. I think that it adds a lot to education. I think it adds a lot to the experience, number one. Number two, I think that it's important when we look at what direction our vocational school is going in, which really, you know, should be established by the policymakers at the school department. We need to really put a focus on the fact of what our state's driver is, what our state's economy is, and that's really the life sciences and STEM-based occupations, Mr. President. So when we're providing a vocational education to our students, and this vocational education isn't changing with the times, isn't changing with the actual economy that's out there for them to be employed in the future, then we're not doing our job. So, you know, again, I certainly am not scared to see the walls, those imaginary walls at Medford High School come down so that the children in the vocational school and the children in the high school can integrate and be included with each other, develop good friendships, develop a sense of community, a sense of rapport, Mr. President, and then become strong contributing members to our society here in Medford. With that being said, Mr. President, you know, I certainly would like to see these papers separated. On April 29th, we took a vote, and that vote stands. It hasn't been 90 days since that vote's gone through. Based on our rules, it's a paper that should be ruled out of order. However, I'll leave it up to you to make a judgment on the paper. However, I'd support Councilor Marx's resolution wholeheartedly to congratulate the administrators, faculty, staff, members of the school committee, and so on.
Very good. So on the motion to sever the resolutions, on the main motion of Councilor Marx of congratulations, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Yes. All those opposed? Motion carries. On the second part, the B paper of Councilor Penta, reiterating previous requests, to get an update. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Finally, reverting back to the regular order of business under the motion of Councilor Camuso. All those in favor, all those opposed. Regular order of business 15-455 offered by Councilor Penta. Be it resolved, since the mayor has yet to update the citizens, businesses, community of West Medford and this council on the contaminated West Medford parking lot underground soil, a public hearing before the council be called with all parties invited. Councilor Penta.
On March 11th of this past year, just 2 months, we had a resolution that was passed unanimously by this council for the purposes of getting an update as to what's going on as it relates to the remediation of the parking lot in West Medford. We still haven't heard anything. As Councilor Caviello will attest to, we've heard numbers range anywhere from $2 million to almost $7, $8, $9 million to have this thing remediated. Come to find out that supposedly on March 14th, 2 days later, excuse me, on March 13th, a meeting did take place with the Director of our Energy and Environment as it relates to the brownfields, the dirt contamination, the cleanup efforts, and the buildings that have been affected in West Medford, in that particular area. Now, we know we have a mayor that's going out of office. He's made that announcement. You have a budget director that's going to be leaving at the end of the week, because that person is deciding to try to go to other places. And we have a multi-million-dollar issue facing us right here, again, with no resolution. This is not making any sense at all. There's a time schedule that was proposed way back when as to what would take place. We were told that we would be kept into the loop. We were told of public hearings that would take place. And, you know, and part of the report that was submitted on March 13th indicates there is additional work that must be done to meet EPA requirements before a preferred work plan can be presented to the occupants of the buildings and to the general public in that particular parking lot. Now, we haven't seen or heard anything. And it's just not making any sense at all, Mr. President. The last time we got an update was August 11, 2014. Now we're talking about March of 2015, and we still have no response as to, excuse me, we still have no response as to what's going on. So I don't know where we're going with all of this, Mr. President. I really think we need to be apprised as to what is going on. Excuse me, I apologize. It's March of 2014. The last time we had any communication was August of 2014. So we're well over 6, 7, 8 months and not getting any response. We're not getting anything as with the state DEP or the EPA. We're getting no cost proposals or anything. So again, why are department heads just refusing to answer us? Why is the mayor doing this? He's leaving. He doesn't care. It's quite obvious. He hasn't cared for a long period of time. But the taxpayers need to know, because this is going to cost them. It's going to be out of their pocket, one way or the other, if we don't get any bonds or we don't get any federal, we don't get any state money. I don't know, Mr. President. You know something? I'd like to move that we have Alicia Hunt. She's the environmental person. Come down and meet with us and give us an update as to what's going on, because it's obvious that our city engineer is not doing that. We've asked for her to come down. She responds, and I don't even know who to talk to around here anymore. Does anybody know who's in charge? Well, Fred Del Russo in a few weeks will be in charge. Yeah. Well, you said it, Councilor Camuso. Remember, loud and clear, and I agree with you. That's the rumor. And let me tell you, if that rumor comes to fruition, shame on this city. Shame on this city. For the mayor.
On this city?
Yeah, shame on this city, because you know something? I don't even know if you want the job. I don't know if you're up for it. You know, I think you have a hard time with this job. I don't know what you would do as being mayor. So, well, let's say, listen, why would he? He makes $500,000 another job. Why would you want to pay for 141? Well, if you don't like me here, then what do you want me to do? Don't tell me what to do. You run if you think it's such a great job. Yeah. Well, I'm very comfortable too, so don't tell me what to do.
Thank you, Councilor Penta. So on the motion of Councilor Penta that the Director of Environmental Affairs meet with the
city meet with us and give us an update.
Meet with an update, present themselves before the council.
You better include the Office of Community Development, because they had something to do with this with Brown and Caldwell as it relates to that.
We will also invite not only the city engineer, the head of environmental affairs, and the OCD director. On the motion of Councilor Penta, Councilor Caviello.
Mr. President, I was notified by one of the businesses down there in West Memphis today that the mayor is going ahead with his injection plan. They were informed that he was going to he's going ahead where they were going to dig up some dirt and inject the chemicals under the building. That was one of the plans that was talked about. So I don't know, but let's say I found that out today through one of the businesses. So maybe that's true, maybe it's not true, I don't know.
Councilor Penta.
As it relates to Councilor Caviello's terminology, March of last year, they were supposed to establish a quality assurance plan. May to June of last year, they were supposed to collect all the data that was needed to refine Phase 3. July and August last year, they're supposed to write the Phase 3 plan, which would be 4 to 6 weeks out. In September, there was supposed to be a public comment period. We never had it. October, the city was supposed to respond to the comments. We never heard anything about it. In late fall and winter final, they would have the final remediation design. That's what the city signed off on. We haven't seen any of that. And now you're telling me he's going to be digging holes and sticking liquid in there to, he's going
That was one of the plans that was proposed where they take a certain amount of soil and then they inject chemicals under the buildings, and the chemical is supposed to help dissipate.
That was something that was discussed, but it wasn't decided upon. You can't decide on anything when you haven't had the public hearing.
I was informed by one of the building owners today.
On that motion, Councilor Camuso.
Thank you. You know who I really feel bad for in this whole debacle? Is the business owners in those 3 properties that are affected by a contaminated lot that is owned by the city of Medford. I know that the administration was doing their due diligence to see if there was insurance policies in place, to go back and go after whoever contaminated this land 80 years ago. But the fact of the matter is, these businesses are suffering. You go into any of those businesses, and they have the they have the equipment in them to make sure that they're breathing quality air. They're having the levels tested. It's just, you know what? We have to have some sort of a plan for this as a community. You know, if indeed it's going to be costing the amount of money they're saying to do this, you know what? Take all 3 properties by eminent domain, do a whole development, and at the same time you clean it up. You clean it up and you give these people back at somehow, some way. You know you work it out that the current owners would be paid for the value of their land, but they'd also be given an opportunity in the new development, whatever it may be, to do the same type of establishment. You know, first right of refusal and things like that. I mean, enough is enough. That's where the vision comes into play. You don't have to, it's like Locust Street when people say we got to do some rezoning down there. Well, guess what? Locust Street in that area can be reconfigured. It doesn't have to remain Locust Street, a straight shot from Mystic Valley Parkway to Riverside Avenue. It can be cul-de-sacs. It can be a shopping area on the Mystic River. There's a lot of options down there, but this is where vision comes into place, Mr. President. But the business owners, the property owners, it's coming to a point now where they're lucky that this hasn't put some of them out of business. Exactly. The amount of money and funding and time and energy that they've put into this project. So,
are you through, Councilor?
Yeah, but
thank you.
Last but not least, has the city ever looked into working out some arrangement where they could take over the whole thing, buy the property from the owners and do a development, which will pay for the cleanup essentially?
Hopefully, we'll get those questions answered when we have those department heads before us.
This is a good issue.
For an update. It's an important issue. So on the motion of Councilor Penta, Councilor Penta.
On that motion, Councilor Camuso what he's alluding to, I know one in particular is just having a hard time, can't even refinance because the bank is aware of the fact of the chemical problem over there. But you must have been reading my notes because we had this discussion a couple of years ago as it relates to that. Here's where a perfect public-private partnership could take place. Okay, you could take that whole area over there, ask all the business people to put in whatever the X amount is. The city puts in X amount of money. The state, he has the ability to do all the parks over 3 times. Let him find out some money for business. You're killing them with the land over there. You killed them with a 10-year contract for the trash, a 10-year contract for the kiosks, a 10-year contract with Comcast, and then you're going to leave town with this mess.
Well, Councilor Penta, let me just talk a little bit more about vision.
Yeah. There's no vision there when you're talking about 10 years.
No, I'm talking about Paul Camuso's vision, not the mayor or anyone
Yeah.
else. This is Paul Camuso's vision. But think about this. We have money that's set aside right now in a transportation bond bill for the garage in Medford Square. We could put some sort of parking down there that could abut the train station where it currently exists on the other side of the tracks, so the train doesn't even have to stop anymore and basically cause the confusion that it does, and it stops for 20 minutes when it's an inbound train. There's stuff to be done down there, potentially, by using some of these monies and capital that's put aside. You know, but unless you get engaged in the conversation and talk about bringing a real solution to the table, we're just going to keep having conversations about this. But this is a real good opportunity for a public-private partnership to get together, for the city to purchase the land in question, the buildings that's directly around the land. You clean up the site, and then you turn around and you put it up for bid. And here's the other thing too: if we're doing that, a developer can come in and put a garage underground in West Medford, add another 200 spots to West Medford Square. This is all stuff that should be talked about.
Or bury the train.
Exactly. I mean, you look at that specific land, it's it's like a triangle. It's got, you got the building where Snappy Patty's is, you have the liquor store and the hair salon, and then you have the building out behind it. You got a good acre and a half of land there if you put it all together with very, very, very good potential. Right now, what is it? It's a sick area that is going to cost us millions of dollars to clean. Let's try to come up with something to clean it up. And I'm sure the business owners too, and we certainly can't speak to them, for them, because this is just quick thoughts. But the liquor store, for instance, they get a brand new site to operate his current business. You're going to have more environmentally friendly coolers. You're going to have more environmentally friendly business. You're going to have more environmentally friendly coolant systems, heating and HVAC, air conditioners, and just the regular heating. I mean, monthly expenses will go down with a new development there for the land, current landowners. But this is where you have to have a vision. And like I said, Locust Street, I think we're missing the boat on Locust Street. And that's why I didn't support another auto body shop down there a year and a half ago, because Locust Street is a premier spot to get a good development like a Stations Landing. No one ever thought Stations Landing would be as beautiful as it is today.
It is.
Nobody. What was Stations Landing previously known for? Going down to get your Christmas trees, going to Bickford's, and then going to Strawberries to get a new record of tape when it came out. That was about it.
Richard's Car Hop.
What was it?
Richard's Car Hop.
Richard's Car Hop. You're a little bit older. But with that being said, that had some vision, and there's no reason why some other of these other areas in our community that are blighted somewhat or environmentally sick can't be done in the same way. Look at the DPW yard.
Precisely.
The DPW yard looks beautiful now.
Very nice. Thank you, Councilor Musso.
Vision that works.
Councilor Caraviallo.
I think what Councilor Penta and Councilor Camuso are looking for, it's called the Office of Redevelopment, which we do not have in this building.
Redevelopment Authority.
It's called redevelopment, not OCD or anything. It's redevelopment.
Very good.
I would hope that the new mayor has that vision to put that into their new administration.
Oh, he will.
So on the motion of Councilor Penta, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. The records. The tabled records of the April 28th meeting were passed by Councilor Camuso. On the motion of Councilor Camuso for approval, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes. The records of the May 5th, 2015 meeting were passed to Councilor Caraviallo. Councilor Caraviallo, how did you find those?
I have reviewed the records, Mr. President. I find them in order. Motion for approval.
On the motion of approval of the records of May 5th by Councilor Caraviallo, all those in favor? All those opposed? Records are approved. On the motion of Councilor Knight to adjourn, all those in favor? All those opposed?